Welcome to the September 3rd, 2019 Instructional Committee meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our first, welcome Dr. Menzo, we're glad to have you back. Our first order of business tonight is to accept our Instructional Committee meeting minutes of June 3rd, 2019. Yes, Karen?
Yes, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions and a correction. On page 2, the second to the last paragraph, I seem to remember that perhaps it wasn't just we were looking to get heart rate monitors for just Moran. I thought we were going to get them for Lyman Hall as well.
I agree with, I don't know.
You remember that? That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think it may have been for both.
That would make sense.
I do want to just share, we did get them for both, so
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
if that
Okay.
makes a
Well,
difference,
Perhaps if
but
the minutes could reflect that, I think that would be helpful.
I could.
Yes.
Yeah, I can put in, they have since been purchased.
Yes,
Great.
okay, that sounds
everything.
great.
Great.
And
It,
then.
actually, we purchased for 4 schools, so they were all the same type and the same software, and staff has already been trained on them, and Mr. Loomis is doing a really great job of engaging the PE staff in how to use them throughout the class periods. So that's all taken place.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other one is just a clerical error, which I'll give you afterwards on page 9. And under letter U, I just want to make sure that, because I asked this for clarification, to make sure that a description of the book itself is going home to parents. Because it says at least 1 week before each unit, the classroom teacher selects which books will be incorporated into a particular unit, and then sends home the list to parents with a description of the unit. But I just
Also, a
want to make
description
sure
of the
it's-
books goes, as well as different websites that they could also go to find out more about the
Right.
book.
Just
Yes.
so parents know what their child is reading, and if they think
Yes.
it's something that's concerning to them, they can opt them out.
Correct, and
Great.
the backup provided that evening had the description
Mhm.
revised based on the concerns that were brought forward the first time the book came up for discussion.
Right.
And that is still locatable on the district website in terms of the backup materials, but that is
Okay,
what the
I just want to
teachers
make
use.
sure that the parents have that opportunity.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lewick. Any other discussion? Let's take consensus. Can we start with Mr. Votto?
Yes.
Yes, with the corrections.
Yes.
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 And yes, thank you. Our next order of business tonight is public comment. So if you are interested in coming up and speaking in front of the board, we do ask that you state your name and address for the record. So I'll open it up right now. Right up to this microphone right here. Is there any public comment?
On any topic?
Any topic?
This is it.
Good evening, I'm Linda Marie Colon, 22 Powers Road, Wallingford. My daughter's an 8th grader at Dag Hammarskjöld. I have a few questions on the cell phone policy. I'm curious as to the origins of the policy and the objective of the policy, and then in particular, the elimination of the lunchtime access.
So I think tonight is more public comment rather than question and answer.
Well, I
think
actually
for
have
our-
some comments too. so,
Go-
yeah.
In terms of origin, typically our policies go through the policy committee and then 3 reads before they get approved by the full board. So those discussions happened over the last 3 or 4 months and then approved at the full board meeting.
I was curious because I never got any kind of communication throughout the year, and I'm pretty involved as far as there being any issues. So I was curious how it came to be an item on the agenda to be voted on from the previous year. There was never any discussion or email sent home or parent-teacher conferences, open house, anything that showed that there was an issue, so I was a little bit surprised. And then to have their free time impacted, as well as having the phones be completely shut off, that part is concerning to me as well.
If I could comment, all of our meetings, first of all, are on the website, and they're all visible through YouTube. There's a certain level of responsibility we have, and obviously a certain level of responsibility you have as a parent. We do have all of our agendas that are posted, and it was on, as Ms. Corso said, for 4 agendas. And so therefore, that was one way of communicating. We are going to change our practice because we do believe that obviously parents might not be aware of that or have other things than their children that they have their minds on, and what's going on in the school district. So we are going to be sending out reminders before every board meeting on a Friday. We're not going to put what's going on because we have to leave some responsibility to those reading it. But we are going to put the website, a link to the website, so you can look at the web. You could look at the website. You could look at the agendas. You could look at previous agendas. You could look at all the materials, and you'll know what time the meeting is and the date of the meeting, because we do see that as a concern, and we recognize that, and I do see that as a value-added concern that you bring to us, and others have too. So we want to address it, but I think you could understand that we also there's so much we could do.
Sure. I'm just saying, for those that don't have access to Wi-Fi or any other means, it's somehow communicating that there is a meeting coming up, because we're
Well,
new
it's
to
also
the
in
district.
it's in the record journal. They list all of our meetings, and it's always
I'm
on our
maxed
calendar.
out on my articles, so.
Oh,
As a
okay.
digital reader,
Sorry.
yeah, I maxed out on my
Yeah,
articles, so
so-
I'm grossly behind that way. But yeah, I think it's important that, just a reminder somehow
Sure.
that these are coming up, because I totally would have been here this summer, definitely for the cell phone policy. I was a little surprised that it was run through the summer when
We didn't do it during the
attendance
summer,
is sparse.
actually.
It wasn't June, July, August?
No, it was actually, we didn't discuss it in July intentionally, because if you go
Mm-hmm.
back to the meeting that we had, the last meeting we had on this topic, we said we didn't want to do it while people might be away.
Exactly.
That's exactly why we didn't do
Mhm.
the facility study either, because we didn't want people to be away. We wanted to be cognizant
Sure.
of that. Most people go away in July.
Mhm.
The other thing is that when it comes to the policies, the origin in the FAQ that was sent out on Friday, some do come from statutory requirements, some come through conversations that the board have had for years, and one of them was the electronic devices. That's been something that the board, in several iterations, I think Ms. Costelli wants to comment on that, has been discussing. But I do really appreciate the communication piece.
Yes,
And we are
definitely.
going to work on that,
Thank you.
I promise.
Thanks, Dr. Menzo. Mrs. Castelli?
So as a member of the policy committee, I just want to address the issue about where did this come from? Where was it initiated from? It was initiated from the fact that we routinely go through all of our policies and update them. This policy has been on the books, and it clearly says, it's the actual, the policy as it is, well, up until the new one got approved, was use of beepers, in parentheses, paging devices, and cellular telephones. And under cellular telephones, it clearly says students may possess cellular telephones while they are in school, but the telephones must be turned off and out of sight during the school day, except that students may use cellular telephones during their assigned lunch periods. That was the existing policy up until the new one. The reason for it being updated was the fact that it's no longer just cellular telephones. You'll notice that the policy is actually now called electronic devices. So we were updating the existing policy, and we had lengthy discussions at the committee level to discuss lunch and passing times at the high school level, et cetera, and what we felt was appropriate. And the biggest concern from the committee was the fact that kids don't talk to each other anymore. They text each other. And we want to get them back to not being addicted to these phones, and to really actually have eye-to-eye contact with people and learn how to carry on a conversation. That was our reason for eliminating it at lunch, except at the high schools.
And so if they're turned off, so not put on silent, which goes beyond vibrate, turned off, how does that comply with the ALICE training? Because isn't everyone expected to see something, say something, or everyone is supposed to be able to call 911? Are we empowering the students to call 911?
The new policy clearly states that in an emergency situation, they may use their phones.
But the 30 seconds that it takes to power up, I mean, can make a difference, right? So if you're separated from your classroom and you're coming from the media center, the guidance counselor, the bathroom, and you do see an active shooter maybe go this way down the hall, and you back up into the media center so that maybe you can call 911, or are you expected to outrun the active
Well,
shooter
the
and
media
get to the
center has a media,
classroom?
library media specialist with a phone that does dial out to 911.
And
So
all
that does
classrooms do
exist.
too
All
now.
of our classrooms did that. That was one of the first upgrades we did after the unfortunate tragedy of Sandy Hook. That was not something that the district had at that time, and we immediately put that in place. So for that example, the student would go into the library media specialist, where there would be that person, where they could call 911 and be the adult presence for that student who's calling 911.
And then bathroom, on your way back from gym class, any kind of stragglers, if you're
Again, we
separated from
can
your
go
immediate
through,
classroom?
I think we could go through all those scenarios. I don't think it's in violation of Alice training at all. And I know Ms. Corso has been trained in it as well. And she just concurred that it's not a violation of that. I think, again, it's about the fact that there's a disturbance. This has been on the books, that they weren't supposed to be powered on. I think that we're trying to, again, engage students appropriately. You know, I understand, and we certainly understand students' desire to sometimes reach out to their families, and as in the FAQ, as you probably read this past week, it said that if a student does need to communicate with his or her parents, they could ask the teacher makes the professional judgment, and my money is the teacher's going to make a good judgment because we have great professionals. So I think that we were cognizant. These were rich conversations about this policy at that time, and we're kind of violating our own rule by answering questions. So I think at this
Yeah.
point, I'm going to stop responding,
That's
not
okay.
out of disrespect
Yeah,
Yeah,
at
no, I
all,
get it.
but I just don't want to violate. 'cause
Against
I'm-
our agenda,
Yeah, so I
actually.
apologize.
Sorry, public comment, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My bad.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Steve Falconeri. My daughter is Ari Falconeri. I live on 3 Twin Oaks Road. So the only comment that I have is I certainly understand cell phone use and excessive cell phone use, and certainly in the classroom when a student needs to be focused. And having something that is distracting like a cell phone or social media or texting does have an effect negatively on a student's grades, and I certainly agree with that. I do think that phones could be used educationally, and I did see an article on the National Education Association where a teacher was using them, but I think students have Chromebooks, which kind of takes the place of that, because it is important. This is their world. You know, their world is this. Cell phones aren't going away. They're not. Where I don't agree is the new ban on lunch, and I do understand that they can be addictive, but there has to be other criteria that comes along with that. There has to be a drop in grades, there has to be lack of sleep, there has to be something else that comes along with it, because there is, applications that can have that addiction. But I think what's happening is we're ignoring the other social aspects of that, where I don't think that kids are just blindly, in their phone at lunch, but at times they're using it as a social tool. I do believe that they use it as a social tool, and I know my own daughter where she did struggle socially. And we were really conflicted about getting her a phone. She had a hard time going up to people. She was anxious. And a phone actually helped her overcome that, because it was a tool to help her overcome that, whether she was showing somebody a picture, whether it was a funny video, but she was able to connect with students. And I think at home, when they're using it, they're not paying attention to me. They're not looking at me, they're in their phones, but when they're with their peer group, it's different. And I really think that they do socialize. But even beyond that, the other important thing is the communication. At lunchtime, that's when my wife does communicate with my daughter, so my wife can make those plans, whatever plans that she has to make for the end of the day. I'm blessed my wife works from home, but she works from home. So she has to be able to make those plans ahead of time, and it's a perfect time to do that. The other concern that I have is if you ban them, during their break time, which is lunch, where there's no need to focus, there's no need to, to be focused on a particular assignment, so having that distraction isn't going to affect their grades I lost my train of thought of where I was going. So having them at lunchtime is, it just left. It left what I was thinking. But I do
I
think.
know that feeling well.
What was, no, it's gone.
No, it's not.
It's gone. But anyways,
Sorry.
my point is that I do think it can be beneficial, and certainly making those plans and doing that. Oh, I remembered, it came back. So what my concern is what I've read is when districts do ban phones for lunch and they don't provide that free time for them to do that option to do that, what they see is an increase in using it at times when it's inappropriate, when they shouldn't be using it. And that's, that's also the concern, because now you're gonna have a new reason to discipline children, and they haven't been allotted that time in which, here's the time to do it appropriately, here's the time not to do it appropriately. So I hope you consider it and think about it and rethink that there may be some benefits to it. But thanks, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mark Britton, 7 Old Pasture Court in Wallingford. I agree with keeping the cell phone use as restrictive as possible. I've been an educator for 20 years at the high school level. I'm in a district that has a 1-to-1 policy. I'm an ALICE certified trainer, as well as a Stop the Bleed trainer on top of that stuff. So I feel, and I have 3 children in this school system as well. So it's my number one concern going into the classroom is me competing with a cell phone against these kids' attention. I can't do it. And I'm not gonna pat myself on the back, but I work really hard at my profession. I work really hard at my lessons, right? And I can't compete with YouTube. I can't compete with online games. I can't compete with that buzzing going off and the kids not knowing what's going on. Is it mom? Is it my friend? Whatever it may be, and that impulse to get back to them. Kids are in my class FaceTiming people. They'll have their calculator on the desk, right? And we encourage the use in ours, right? And we're finally moving to more away from cell phones into Chromebooks, which is good because that's, laptops are much better for productivity, right? Cell phones are meant for consuming. So I'm in agreement, complete agreement with the policy. I would keep it as restrictive as possible as we can. I think I completely agree with keeping it banned during lunchtime because things carry over. You don't finish your conversation, you don't finish your video during lunch, and now that comes into the classroom, the phone is on, because these kids aren't gonna turn it off. They're gonna put it on vibrate, and then they're gonna check and see what's going on and communicate back and forth. So I understand some of the concerns. I understand people wanna plan with their kids. I could give you guys 1,000,001 examples, of confrontations that I've had with students based on their cell phone policy. Put it away. No, is my mom doing what I want? I'm taking this call. I'm going out. Instead of asking and doing the right thing. I'm 3 days into school already. I'm asking kids to turn off their music in the classroom. All right, because I can hear it. And this is the honeymoon period as being a teacher, right? So where they should be listening and coming back with that attitude. Hey, I'm going to do all this here. And I think when you break it down to the middle school level, they have even less control. I'm teaching juniors and seniors. I'm trying to teach executive functioning levels. I'm trying to teach management of devices because I agree that when you get into the workplace, right, you need to be able to do that. So I'm a little less restrictive and trying to get them to manage themselves and not have that confrontation. And I think when you break it down to the younger levels, it's going to make it that much more difficult to do. Also, we have to worry about, I know there's 1,000,001 good uses for cell phones, but there's also equal number of negatives against it. And when we look at the middle school level, I hated my middle school career. I would never go back to be a middle school teacher, right? But
All right, that's enough. I love.
I'll probably
middle school.
apply.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, so it was because of the social emotional piece, right? And the kids are forming the norms, they're forming the moral compass at that point. They know right from wrong at that point, and they do things impulsively, sometimes good, sometimes bad, that can be very hurtful or helpful to people. And I think having the cell phones isn't going to help that situation at all. So I think those are all the points. Oh, I had one more, and I know you didn't want to ask questions. I looked like you guys were adopting or going to discuss a new cell phone policy tonight, like a 81A or something, but
It's the regulation.
okay, I didn't see that one. I couldn't load that on the website, so
So different from the policy, the regulation is how we will actually implement
okay.
the policy.
Okay, fair enough. I couldn't tell what that was. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Busa, 182 North Wilsey Ave, Wallingford. 2 boys in the school system. Both are in middle school at DAG, 6th and 7th graders. I just want to applaud the Board of Education on their choices they made and the changes that have been made to the policy. it was definitely an outdated policy, and the changes that have been made, I think are going to benefit the teachers, the environment, as well as the students. I know personally with my boys, or the now 7th grader, that last year at lunch, you know, he'd come home and we'd ask him, hey, what'd you guys talk about at lunch? Lunch? We didn't talk at lunch. You know, so-and-so was watching a video on his Chromebook, this person was watching a video on his phone. There was no conversation at lunch. And I really think that that is important, that the kids do have that ability. There's very little unstructured time in the day that allows them to actually go ahead and have those conversations without the distraction of that device, right? Once they get out of school, before school, on the bus, at home, that distraction is always there unless the parents are regulating it. So having that ability there, I think is great. The other thing I'll say is my wife was a teacher a few years back, moved on to another career now. But going back 10 years, her district was having an issue with cell phones. And it's kind of the flip of what parents here have discussed as far as being able to make those phone calls on an emergency. That district was having an issue where kid felt sick. Call mom or dad on the phone, walk out of school. Never interact with a teacher, the office. It was this direct conversation, and it kind of bypassed all the structure that was in place in the district, in the school itself. So there's gotta be that break there between the cell phone, the parents, and the kid, so that everyone knows what's going on. And it's just too easy to have that one-on-one conversation and exclude those that need to know. So again, I applaud you, thank you for the changes, and hopefully nothing will change from where it is today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, thank you, everybody who stood up to speak tonight. We really appreciate your comments. Moving forward, curriculum and possible consensus. We're going to start with a proposed approval of the Lyman High School trip to Belize from April 10th, 2021 to April 18th, 2021.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, welcome.
I'm excited. I'm excited to have Nicole Decker-Lawler with me tonight. She is putting together a second phenomenal trip, which will be a wonderful experience for ag science students. She'll talk a little bit more about all of the various courses in the ag science, under the ag science umbrella, that will be fostered through this experience. She's a veterinary science teacher at Lyman Hall, and she's one of the advisors of the FFA. This is a wonderful opportunity for students to get out in the real world and do a global service learning project. It very much plays into transferable skills, to the standards and indicators in the area of science and global awareness. And Nikki's excited to talk to you a bit more about it and to answer any questions that you might have as well.
Good evening.
Welcome.
So I found this amazing trip that is going through Education First. Being in the agri-science department, you all know that we have 8 different areas of concentration, so we have a lot of variety in our students. And from the itinerary that I sent to you all, there is a touch upon 4 of the different ones. So we're going to be seeing food science, where you're actually going to be doing hands-on cooking classes with the culture there, and also learning to make hot sauce at a hot sauce factory and how to produce cocoa in a chocolate making factory. We'll also be working with the plant science and going to a banana farm while there. Aquaculture is hit while being able to go see, learn a little bit about an introduction for their reef and what is exposed there, and then the students would be able to go snorkeling in the reefs itself. And then also go to seeing a little bit of natural resources, where we'll be able to go some caving and also do a zip lining tour and seeing the floral and fauna of of Belize and its lovely area. It's an 8-day tour, and a lot of other things like seeing ruins and a couple of museums and such. So I thought it was a really thing that I was able to hit a lot of different components on it, and I think a lot of students would get a lot out of the experience.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah.
Mrs. Castelli?
Hi, so my only concern
Of course.
is for the safety of the kids, of course, and the zip lining. When I read that, I was like, if it was in the United States, I'd be okay with it, because I know that our safety regulations here in the U.S. are second to none.
Correct.
I would want to, I don't want to, certainly don't want to, put the kibosh on this trip or the zipline component of it just because of my own personal feelings about it, but I would want to make sure that we've checked into the safety measures in Belize. My daughter actually did ziplining in Belize, and she loved it. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I know it's a great experience. I just want to make sure, I'm just very concerned that these students are in our care, and I want to make sure that we know that it is a safe environment for them to be in. And my second question would be for those kids that choose not to do the ziplining, if some of them decided it was a little too scary, I'm assuming that's okay, and they'd have a chaperone that would stay with them as well.
I believe so. Normally, for all of these tours, it is kind of made so everyone does go on all of the different parts, so we would make sure that somebody would stay behind. I've never been to Belize to do the zip lining there. I have done in Costa Rica. I also do rock climbing, and I do the zip lining around here, so I do know the equipment specifically myself. I'm not an expert, nor am I trained in anything, but obviously helmets, obviously gloves, obviously proper harnesses, making sure that
what
they're
I'd be
on.
most concerned about.
Of course, making sure they're on properly and whatnot,
Yep.
functioning properly.
Yep.
Yep.
Just if I may comment, that
course.
one portion of the trip which we had talked about internally, we have to pass also by the risk manager for the town.
Sure.
Because no matter what a parent might write off as a disclosure or as a relinquishing of responsibility, at the end of the day, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So that part of the trip might have to be revisited.
Okay.
But I don't think that takes away from the whole essence of the trip.
No,
I
it
think the
doesn't.
other components, I want to go make chocolate. Yes, I'm sure you do, Mr. Votto. But we actually, in our last trip, when we had the students in Australia, the students wanted to climb the Sydney Harbor Bridge, and I was the want of the group saying, no, you can't, because I know I was the wet blanket, but regardless of how safe it is, we do have to stay within the confines of what the town will allow us to do. So we'll look into that, but I don't think that would be any reason for the board not to accept the trip at this point if they chose to do so.
Thank you.
Ms. McKay?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would go one step further, Kathy, and say you've got snorkeling and cave tubing.
Yeah, we
So
have to
you've
look
got
at
to
all
make
of
sure
them, yeah.
people, I mean, can they swim? And snorkeling, it'd be ideal if they've had a prior experience, because it sounds like all great. I've snorkeled a ton, but I was just in this region, actually, and I was in Honduras, and this couple went out, and we went all the way out, and they're like, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, like now you decide not to snorkel, but they didn't have the experience, and when they put their face in the water, it was, I guess, too much. I don't know, whatever. But you got to make sure that kids can swim. And so, those are, I would assume, all components.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
the town officials are
I'm
amazingly
in
supportive
support
of
of it.
everything we do. So, I mean, Kurt Schreiber, who's the head of risk management, is amazing. He works with Kim on a variety of trips and opportunities. So he will not negate it if he
Right.
doesn't feel that it's going to be potentially a situation that could be challenging.
And I would imagine at some point, we've got to get, with parental consent,
Yes.
sign-offs on that says you understand the risk,
But again, I think that
I know,
sometimes
but we don't want to
those
be down
don't-
that
yeah.
avenue. I know.
And
No, I
also working
appreciate
with this
that.
group, I'm sure they'd be very flexible coming up
Oh,
with
I'm
another
sure.
thing.
Yeah.
And
I'm in favor of it. I think it'd be a great
I'm
experience.
flexible. I love it, but I would do whatever, and
Hear
then
ya.
like honestly, when it comes to that, also like I did for Iceland, I'm hoping to also include another service project, because I really do think that the students doing a hands-on learning while there is really, really important. So maybe they throw that out and put more of that in. They're really good with the people I'm working with to kind of create a tour what we need and would
Yeah.
like. So
Yeah.
yep.
So I just want to make that point too.
Sure.
I just
Mr.
want
Votto?
to. Just one more thing.
Sure.
I just wanted to say that because I think a lot of our teachers are taking on a lot of these international trips, and I just want to say thank you, because this is a lot of responsibility,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of forethought that went into this, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Votto?
Appreciate it.
Sorry, I should have said that too.
Thank y'all.
Do you know how many children might be involved in this or interested in it right now?
I would like up to 30, between 15 and 30.
But have you taken any kind of a poll to
I
see
have
what
not.
kids?
I wanted to make sure that it was
Because you
approved
did a
before.
lot of legwork here.
I did. I did.
Right.
I want to make sure that it
What's
was a
your
go
what's
before.
your cutoff? In other words, you won't go if your
I would like
numbers-
at least 15.
At least 15.
Mhm.
And do we need to approve this tonight, folks?
Um,
Does it have to be approved tonight?
Not necessarily. I don't think it has to be approved tonight.
I mean, I'm concerned about some of those things too.
So what
We
would
can
you
ask-
look for? What would you look for, Mike? Would you want it, I mean, I don't want to waste people's time, but should we take it to the town, to Kurt Schreiber, and just see what he thinks?
I'll bring it by tomorrow.
I don't know, I'm just asking, would that help
In
you?
other words, when a child signs up, I would assume you're gonna say, do you snorkel? And if 5 kids say, no, I've never done it before, I mean, are you gonna take them snorkeling?
Not
I
if
think
they-
at that point, like Nicole was saying, these companies, EF, Explorica, Promo Tours, are wonderfully able to personalize what you're doing. So if Nikki were to realize that there was a preponderance of students who weren't, even if Mr. Triber were to say, you know, X, Y, and Z are okay, if she were to realize that there were students that didn't want to participate in that, EF would either create an alternative activity for them, or the group would do an alternative activity.
Well, I mean, even if he were to approve it, that doesn't mean that I would go along with it. But in addition to that, I would say that I would like to see the alternatives before I approve this. I would like to see you come up with, let's say
plan
you
B.
don't have 5 kids that you have 5 kids that never snorkel, so therefore, like you just said, they have the ability to find other things for these kids to do, personalize it. I would like to see what those alternatives would be, because you know, they might be something that kids aren't even interested in doing, just to do something else for them.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like to be a pain, but I like to cover all bases.
This trip is a ways off.
Yeah.
Nicole's done an excellent job of planning in advance.
I see.
So
Yeah.
if there are items that you would like further information on before making a decision, there's plenty of time to do that.
Ms. Levesque?
I too share the safety concerns, but I think they've been discussed enough so that we know what they are. The other question I have is, could you tell me a little bit more about this partnership with Southern New Hampshire University and the ability to get college credit?
Sure. So the students, it is not a mandatory part of the actual program, but if they would like to, it's an extra, I believe, $215, where they would be given alternate, additional assignments through that university, which would, that actually I don't even partake in. It's one of those things that they actually would sign up through EF, and then they would actually be given like actual credit by by accomplishing some of those assignments throughout to kind of prove what they've learned by learning that, by doing those types of situations.
I think that's an interesting opportunity
Yeah.
for our students.
Yeah.
They wouldn't go towards the student's diploma in Wallingford Public
No. I was
Schools. They
gonna
would
ask.
go post-high school.
Right. But
So it'd
that's-
be accruing it, so separate, it would be like an well, not even that. It'd be separate and in part, so they wouldn't, that wouldn't be part of their 26 credits, because those students would be going with that graduation requirement.
And you all mentioned I did this early, and I did this early on purpose, because my goal is to potentially do this more often, and the earlier I do it, the smaller the monthly payment, so therefore more students can go. So that's why I did this on purpose. So that was.
And
that's
also
it.
raise money possibly to
Exactly,
defray
exactly. We started a
expenses.
bit of fundraising committee with
Sure.
my Iceland, so, you know, it gives a little bit more opportunities for them.
Ms. Raccio?
So what's in our packet for high school credits would not apply on page 5? Is that accurate, Mrs.
It
So
does
it would
not.
have to depend on
don't
the university and when you look at college credit being awarded towards graduation requirements, the state requires certain conditions to be met. So one of them is that it's, the institution is accredited by the Board of Regents, that it is aligned with the state standards. So we would just have to check through those
Okay.
things to ensure that it does.
Okay.
So if it did, then the answer would be yes, they could apply it towards their high school credit, load. If it did not, it doesn't apply towards graduation
Okay.
requirements, but it does towards college credit. So it's
Okay,
gonna
I'm
depend
with you.
on the documentation from the university.
I'm with you. So I'm going to make this a little bit more difficult.
Great.
I'm going to go a little bit further. The state statute has in it a certain number of service hours, and our students can get a certificate of community service. But it has to be, the service project has to be overseen by a faculty member. And our normal community service hours are outside of the school, so normally students don't meet that qualification. Since this is a service project, does it count towards community service, and would it count towards the application for her students to get that certificate, similar to the global competency of, what's the other one? You know.
So I do, yes, certificate of global engagement. One thing that does.
I want them
that's-
both, though. I want community service and global engagement.
So our ag students do another part outside of school, which is known as a supervised agriculture experience. It's somewhat similar to like the capstone. So our students have outside projects, whether it be work of placement and entrepreneurship, volunteership, that kind of thing. We offer hours doing different activities during summer, such as we visit local farms, we might produce food from that, we might go and visit an oyster factory, or down in Norwalk, we saw bison this year. And with those accumulation of time and experience, we also have what we call supplemental hours towards an SAE. For sophomores, they need 150 hours. Juniors, they need 150 hours. And seniors, they need 200 hours to graduate for our program with this SAE. So these hours, while actually physically doing something for each of those activities, we're not talking sleeping, we're not talking flying, but by doing those activities, we were going to be doing supplemental hours towards their SAE, so it would be going towards their high school credit as well.
I think that our policy, if we go back to our volunteer hour policy, in order to fully accommodate what you're suggesting, we have to go back and revise that portion to make certain that we could do that. But I think the more we can have students leverage out of an experience, the better.
And that's
I think we've always said that.
I believe, and it's been a while since I've read the statute, but I believe that's a state recognition. I don't know if it's a seal on the diploma or if it's a letter or something.
I think
but
it's a letter.
Yeah, that's something from the Department of Ed
Correct.
state.
Any other questions or discussion?
Well, I guess I want to just wrap it up with a bow and say, what are next steps so that you guys walk away and you're clear about what the expectations are from us?
It sounds like, again, you didn't take consensus or
No,
not,
right.
but one of the questions that comes up, or one of the jobs
Alternative.
that we can do, and we're going to be at the town hall tomorrow anyway, I'll stop by and see
That's right.
the risk manager.
Yep.
And I can share with him the proposal, and I can say, do some investigation. What
Yep.
do you think? Not about being a killjoy or anything, but what's going to be appropriate for everyone and make
Yeah.
everybody feel comfortable. And then in the meantime, you could investigate with the company saying that if the district decided not to do these two activities, what are alternatives?
Yeah.
And then we could bring those pieces of information back to the board.
So,
Is
just
that-
so, yeah, just.
Does that hit
read it.
upon all of
Yeah,
them?
I think that would address
Okay.
everything I heard. So just, Carrie, for you though, as a placeholder, because I want to keep the ball going for you, but
Yeah.
I don't want to put pressure on you. What's a reasonable amount of time to gather this information? I don't know if it is next month or
Yeah, I think we-
November, but you guys
think
can figure that
October.
out. But I just want to, I don't want to delay it for you guys either. So I liked your way of thinking of opening it up as quickly as possible so students have more time to pay, or their parents have more time to pay off and, all that, and commit and whatever. So, but again, I'm not trying to pressure anybody, but
No, I think by October.
yeah, if
Yeah,
that
I
works,
think
that'd be
we'll be
great.
ready.
And then come back and see where we are up to that point would be a thought.
One more quick question. If you don't get 30 in ag science, would you take kids from out of ag science? If you had 15, would you take 15 from?
So if I take 15, I can take 15, but we had also talked about for Iceland, if I didn't get those numbers at all, we could open it up to Sheehan and for Lyman at the same time to add to the group.
So students that aren't enrolled in ag science?
Correct.
Yeah, but you're saying if you have 15 from ag science, you're gonna cap it there, if I heard you correctly.
I can cap it there. If
Okay,
was-
would that be your preference rather than trying to get to the,
I
I
think
think
so.
Aaron, that's your question.
Yeah, I was hoping somewhere, just stick with the ag students, so.
Okay, so that would
yeah.
be your number one priority, to stick to just ag science if you had the 15
Correct.
and not open it up,
Correct.
yeah, just to general population.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
See you
much.
soon.
Appreciate it.
Thanks
See
for
you
coming.
next month.
Thanks for coming. Our new high school medical terminology textbook, The Language of Medicine.
Yeah, no,
Rob?
I want to see it. Absolutely want to see that book.
Yeah.
Good evening. This is the textbook proposal for the new medical terminology class, which we spoke about back in the spring. I'm sorry it's not as exciting as a trip to Belize.
Well, for some of us it is.
Well, for some people it is,
For some
yeah.
people it is.
I would rather go to Belize. But this is a book that we need for the course because it's a UConn ECE course. It's the textbook that is required for the class, and I'm asking that you approve the purchase.
Discussion. Ms. Levesque?
Can we see a copy, since we're supposed to see a copy of the textbook before we pass?
I was trying to get a copy. We only have one, and it's being used with the class, and I forgot that I didn't have the copy of the book.
That's kind of difficult for us to pass something that we haven't seen. That's,
The
there a-
challenge is that the book is required, so if we don't use this book, the
Right.
students can't get the credit from UConn.
but
So,
technically, the board is
I
supposed
know,
to see
I
the
know, I
textbook,
understand.
to
So-
be truthful with you.
And
Yeah.
I just had that one copy of the book. It's actually being used right now by the teacher as she's.
well, why
so-
don't we do
Well, this is just consensus anyway.
Well, or what we could do, if you would like, we could move it to next week's meeting, and just have the book available at that time, because we do have the operations meeting, same time,
Is that
same
doable?
place, just a week apart.
We can
Or you could take a consensus and we can get you the book to look at. if
I'd
that's-
appreciate it, because this isn't the
Well, I
formal
mean, I guess,
vote.
I appreciate
Yeah.
and Karen, this is your expertise.
Mm.
But
Yeah, especially
I'm
in
gonna be
medical.
honest with you. I mean, this is my rule of thumb about textbooks. I always look to whoever's presenting the textbook to us, is this what you want? I mean, this is your expertise. I'm comfortable going slightly blind in the sense that I'm gonna rifle through it. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna rifle through it for 10 seconds, and I don't bring anything valuable to the table to say that it's a good textbook or not. So I always defer to you folks to tell me that. But in your so I guess my question is, are there other board members, and not to put anybody on the spot, that really want to see this textbook before you feel like you can move this forward, I guess would be my question.
We have already, we have already approved the course, the UConn ECE
Right,
course. So it's hard
exactly.
to then say, no, we can't have this
Correct.
textbook. Mr. Ross?
Unless I could have the textbook for 4 or 5 days, I don't see any point in just sitting here and 9 people having 2 minutes to see it. I would put trust in the teachers and the administration to say this is a good book. Unfortunately, the technicality is there, but the last textbooks we did, I opened it, saw 1-2 pages, handed it to the next person, 1-2 pages, in
That's my
5
point.
minutes, 9 people saw it. I say let's approve it now.
Maybe just moving forward, we can have a textbook on file in Board of Ed office, that if we have concerns, we can come in and take a look at it. I mean, I know you only have one for this one, but just moving
Right.
forward, maybe it's just something we can pop in and look at, so we have more time than just 2 minutes. I'm good taking consensus tonight. Does anybody object?
I have a question. I mean, I have a
Go
comment.
ahead, Ms. Costello.
I just want to say, thank you for finding someone who wouldn't charge us shipping and handling, which usually doubles the cost of the friggin' book.
That's
So,
true.
why can't they all do that?
Well, it's one of the things with this textbook. It's unique within the way it's sold. So many of our other textbooks are with like publishing companies, and then you go with them, and we don't really. We could go direct to the company, or because it's a college text, we can get it through Amazon, and Amazon will just ship you the book for the cost that's here. So.
Mr. Votto?
Since recently we've talked about following policy to the letter, I believe that we should not. As long as Mrs. Levac is correct, that we need to, and I've been here a long time, and we have seen most every book that we approve. I think we should just stick to the guidelines, and next meeting, bring the book with you and we'll approve it.
I would suggest that as well. I said, I think it's not a problem. I think the challenge is that, obviously we can't pull it out of the hands of the teacher right now, but
I
as long as.
understand that.
And
But is
I know
that-
you weren't asking that.
Would
but
that
I-
work, though, for our operations
Well,
meeting?
Just
That
add
would-
it.
I'm just gonna throw a wrench in there. UConn ECE deadline for enrolling in the course comes with a fee, and for not enrolling, there's a fee also if they're enrolled and then decide they're not gonna take it because we don't approve a textbook, or they're on the fence whether or not we're gonna approve a textbook. it may cost students.
And the deadline for that, because you would know as a
Gosh, I think it's
counselor.
September 14th.
Well, we would be
we have-
before
I
that,
could
because
be
that's the
wrong. We have
9th.
time.
We should
Well,
be
we would be,
okay.
we would be on the 9th, so
All
we'd
right.
be
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
that.
Cutting
Okay.
it close, but.
Yeah.
I think enrollment opened August 15th, so
Yeah.
some kids are already enrolled. Yes?
Could I just make a suggestion for future reference? If we're going to have to approve a textbook, can we have it a week before the meeting?
We could do that. In this instance, it's impossible.
No, I understand
but
this instance.
Moving forward.
What do
Moving
you mean,
forward.
have
on
what
this.
available a week before?
Just the
textbook?
textbook, have it
Like the
available so
book.
that we can look at it.
Like
Right.
what, come to central office
Yeah.
to look at it? Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
what
we
you-
would have a
Gotcha.
viewing.
That's
Okay,
fine.
I see what you're saying.
If we want to, if we want to look at it in depth,
Gotcha.
it would be here. I would rather see that, please.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Right. That's great.
Okay, so we'll table that one for next meeting then.
Yep.
Everybody's can,
I want to make that rule clear, though. What's the new thing now? We're going to have a book available for a week in somebody's office, or we're going to be given the book here at the board meeting and we take it home?
Nope, what I'll do
I mean, this is getting totally ridiculous, but go ahead.
What I will do is when I am creating the agenda a week ahead of time, if there's a textbook on it, normally you don't get the agenda till the Friday before the meeting.
Correct.
I will make the board aware that there's a textbook approval coming up on the agenda. I will have it available at central office for anyone who would like to come and spend some time with the textbook.
Thank you for that.
What with the book?
okay, thank you. Film appreciation, is that, Carrie?
Good evening. I have 2 units for the half-year high school English course, Film Appreciation. It's offered in grades 11 and 12. This was a course that had an existing course outline and was revised into 2 units. You have Unit 1, which is technical aspects of filming and focuses on looking at contemporary art form through film. And Unit 2 is sort of extending Unit 1 into making meaning from the technical aspects. And both units take on a very project-based approach, very hands-on, relates a lot to our transferable skills, and looking at film as a text form. I don't know if you have any questions.
Questions? Ms. Levesque?
I just want to note that when we passed this, I had some corrections to the documents, which
In terms
Mrs.
of
Latour has.
Grammar?
Just in terms of some clerical,
Okay,
and a little missing information, which I'm sure will be made available.
thank you. Yes, Mr. Ross?
I'm not trying to be funny, but I would appreciate if when the teacher comes up, she identifies herself.
I apologize.
No, that's not just you. It
Yep.
doesn't have. Tony, how are you?
Carrie Laudadio, I'm the secondary humanities coordinator.
Thank you so much. No, really, I think for the people who are watching. who don't,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Yes?
This is a new unit, correct?
Yes.
Is there a book with this new unit?
So we have an
There's an existing book.
we have an existing text that we put in here as more of a reference. The teachers really rely more on current information online and through the films rather than a text for this particular course.
Any other questions? Ms. McKay?
Yeah, I just want to say, so I have a son that graduated from Lyman Hall in 2013, and it's obviously, it was a very different course even then, and Mr. Daly taught it, and to this day, his knowledge on film appreciation is extraordinary, and he ended up taking another film appreciation course in college and said, by far, and I've told Ken Daly this a million times, Lyman Hall kicked butt in terms of the depth, breadth, and the quality of the course and what he'd learned. And so the fact that you guys are ratcheting it up even another level, I love going to movies with him because his lens is so different than anybody else's lens when he looks at a movie and how he defines what a good movie is. And I look at Lyman Hall. I mean, that was a skill and an interest he had, and you guys did a great job cultivating it, and he wasn't the easiest one to be cultivated as a high school student. So I'm so excited that you guys are even taking it to another level. It's such a great course, and we've done the through Hubcap, we've done the 24-hour. What these kids come up with for a film they're amazing. The creativity, but all of it. So I'm just in total favor of it, and I just want to, as a parent, forget my Board of Ed hat. As a parent hat, it's just a really great thing that we have available to our students.
I can attest to that. I
Yeah.
visited the course several times, and I'm sure the teachers would be willing to have people. It's really an amazing course. This is something that really is near and dear to me in terms of film, but the
Right.
way they angle it and take snapshots of the film, it's
And the range
pretty
of
amazing.
movies that they get exposed to
Yeah.
are everything from classics to current day, and
Yeah.
it just is, to understand even directors and, what goes in, like, what's a producer's role versus a director's role. Even to understand all that goes into movie making is covered, really, and introduced. So it's great. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, let's go ahead and take consensus to approve the new high school film appreciation units. We'll start with Mr. Votto.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, with the corrections.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you your book also?
I am yearbook also.
It's your yearbook.
Okay. So this is a full year art elective offered to seniors. And we currently have a section running at both high schools. And as you could imagine from the title of the course, it's project-based, focused throughout the year on producing, marketing, writing for the yearbook, and really is truly is interdisciplinary in nature in terms of the photography and the layout, working with the the yearbook company through all of their digital technologies. It was fascinating writing this course just to hear through the lens of the teachers what goes into it and how it really brings in business and the arts and the writing. This is really, I think, a really neat example of interdisciplinary at its finest.
I have a quick question for you. So you mentioned that it is an art elective, but considering our larger buckets, now we have this whole humanities bucket, and then we have a STEM bucket. If a lot of the work is done digitally, can it be counted towards the STEM bucket, the technology piece of it, as a STEM elective, instead of just calling it an art elective? I do think that the production of a yearbook is interdisciplinary, and there are
That's what makes it
arguments that it would
But I think that's
span.
what makes it difficult where to put it, because it is interdisciplinary.
I think there's a fair amount of courses moving forward that might serve two buckets. I don't think they can double count, to be quite frank.
Not on both sides.
Right,
one
but
or the
either
other.
or, yes.
Yep.
Right, and
We
we
good with
currently have art and English teachers teaching this course as well.
Wow.
Does that make a difference?
So that does make a difference.
Yeah.
So it would have to stay on the humanities side for now.
Correct.
But it's a good point to think going
Yeah.
forward, Erin.
Well, so none of our business teachers can teach a STEM course? Is that right? Because business falls under tech ed, business,
Well, that would, no,
it's like one of the three.
I think they could. I think because they come under CTE.
Yeah.
They can.
Check ed.
So
But
maybe-
this is, we would have to look at,
Description,
we'd have to look at description, but then we would also have to look at who delivers the instruction.
yes.
So you'd have to bring in a third person. If it's being taught by, you said.
Art and English.
English teacher. You'd have to see whether or not there's a section of the course that they actually go physically or they're involved with the tech teacher,
Got
the
it.
computer teacher.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Votto?
I just want to say, I'm glad you're keep this updated, you're updating it.
Yeah, we'll check the language.
And I can remember in high school, the job this entails, and it's nice to know that, first of all, it's interdisciplinary, and kids are getting credit for it, because they do put a lot of time and effort into it, and it was always on their own time.
Yeah.
after school and whatnot. So this is very good. Thank you.
Let
Thank
us
you.
check the language on the law too, because I want to make sure that we're not being too restrictive or unnecessarily restrictive.
Another question, what's the criteria for taking your book? Just think.
Right now, the teachers do a little bit of an interview with students, but I think for the most part, if students are interested,
Interest.
yeah.
Thank you. Mrs. Purcell?
I just want to comment that I love that it's so into digital citizenship, because I think that is a huge, huge issue
Yep.
right now in society. And I don't know if there's any way to get some of that learning that the kids are taking in that class to pass through other courses, or for them to even share with other students.
Any other questions? Okay, let's take consensus on the yearbook course. Mr. Votto?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this middle school youth risk behavior survey. Mr. Loomis?
Tony Loomis, Wellness Coordinator for Wallingford Public Schools.
Good job, Tony.
In the spring, I brought the National Youth Risk Behavior Survey for the middle school level to you to check out and hopefully vote on to use this coming fall. And you tasked me with coming back with a revised summary, because we talked about some of the questions that I didn't like and some questions that you would like added. You tasked me with coming back with a letter that would be sent home for parents to help with transparency, and also the date. When are we actually going to do this? And so I'll review all those things now. The date that the schools are on board for would be October 30th. That's in line with a similar timeline to when we've done this back in 2017, 2015, and 2013. The letter has been provided to you that we will send home as early as possible. And I'd like to highlight, we tried to go for transparency with it. We tried to go for the fact that this is 100% volunteer. No one has to take this. It's totally voluntary. And also, we wanted to highlight the fact that it's anonymous, and no student names will ever be found. So we put in there that parents can go to the school to view the survey beforehand. I talked with Celeste George from the Connecticut State Department of Health, and a concern was, if a parent viewed the survey, would it change students' responses? And the participation that the state gets from Wallingford is beyond incredible, and where our numbers are at, it makes it really valid, the data that they're collecting from us. So she's not concerned in any way, shape, or form having parents look at the survey beforehand. And so, so that will be in line with what happens at the high school too. They can go to the main office, they could check out the survey, there would be the opt-out form if they would like. And then I put my contact information on there, so if there are any further questions or concerns, I would love for people to talk to me and have a conversation about why we're doing this going forward. I was also asked about the history of the middle school survey from the board. There are no districts in Connecticut that are using this survey. Other states that use the survey near us are Rhode Island, Maine, and Vermont. I asked Celeste specifically about other towns, how come people aren't doing this? And I think the age group, again, it's very sensitive, and we have to be as transparent as possible. And again, that's what we're going for. As far as the revised survey, I provided that to you, and the board was looking for it to be kind of aligned with the high school survey, and I've tried to achieve that. The board was looking to add questions on current use, and I've made sure those were added. The board is looking for a few more areas to be covered, such as cutting or hurting self, and we've added that, or gambling, we've added that, or school connectedness, I've added that. It was a little bit of a challenge of a balance, because I wanted to stay within the 49 questions, Youth and Social Services is wonderful to help us administer this, and we send out the results to an outside company, and Youth and Social Services takes care of all of that, but it does cost money to have the data compiled and analyzed. And so it was a challenge to stay within the 49 questions for the middle school survey, but we've done that. A few questions that were eliminated: a question on cigars, got rid of; a question on cocaine, we had talked about adjusting, talking to Youth and Social Services, talking to the Connecticut State Department of Health. We would have such small numbers for that, we decided to get rid of that question instead of rewriting it. There were 2 questions on weight that I was concerned about. I was thinking of changing the language, but I can't change the language. There's set questions that have been vetted that are used throughout the country, and so I decided to eliminate those questions on weight to help us stay within that 49 question zone. I don't like the questions on weight. I think it's a different emphasis on what we're trying to do with our mission and vision for health and physical education, and it's not a good indicator of overall health, and I don't want the kids' minds being on that. So we've got rid of those questions again in order to make room for some of the other questions. So questions that we've added: alcohol use, current alcohol use amongst students, middle school students, current marijuana use, a question on gambling, a question on hurting oneself, and a question on school connectedness. Is there an adult at the middle school that the students feel comfortable speaking with? And let's see. I think that's about it. So, yes.
Go ahead, Mrs. Caselli.
Okay, Tony, I have a couple questions. One, and I understand we have to stay to the 49 questions. My couple of concerns. One, on number 5, what is your race? Should we have an F for other? I mean, I don't know if there's. You can't change that. You can't change that.
That's a CDC question.
Yeah, so all of these questions are questions I'm not allowed to change. We're not allowed to change. And
we can't, okay, all right, so then let me just point out my concerns, and maybe going forward we can do something about it. The number 27, or in the area about drinking.
That's his. You can change that one.
Oh, you can change that one. So I like the questions. However, I think we need to know if a kid answers the question, how old were you when you had your first drink of alcohol other than a few sips? There is cultural drinking that happens in many homes. And I would want to make sure that we can distinguish that the drinking is at home, under parent supervision, and that's just their culture. You know, we can't, yes, it's against the law, but
No,
it could
not.
be, oh, it's not?
Not at home.
Oh, it isn't? Okay, there you go. So, I mean, culturally, can we somehow figure out if that
Which
is,
question, which number?
well, that whole area, whichever one. 26 and 27. Is it cultural in nature? You know, are you drinking it at home because your parents are giving it to you? I mean, I know my husband talks about that all the time, that, you know, when he was a kid, they had wine at the table and he was allowed to have some wine because they were Italian and that's what they did.
Mrs. McKay?
Are you all set?
No, no,
Oh,
I
I'm
have.
sorry.
That's okay, so that's that one. And then I just have one more, I think, regarding the sexual intercourse. There's no indication about whether this is voluntary or forced, and since there is a lot of sexual abuse, I think it might be important for us, for a kid who's saying, yep, I've had sexual intercourse, but guess what? I didn't want it, but it was forced on me. So if we can somehow factor that in.
I think as far as that goes, it's such a sensitive topic that they were worried about going a little too far with it with the middle school kids. And just having sexual intercourse at all could be a little risque.
Well, what about, has anybody touched you inappropriately? Or, you know, something that we can...
But we can't do anything with it once.
No, I know, because you can't, but it would be nice to be aware that if a kid is answering these questions...
But it's anonymous.
I know it's anonymous. I'm not saying, what I'm saying is, but we should know that, out of the, 20 kids that said yes, 10 of them said because they're being inappropriately touched. You know what I mean? I think it's important for us to know that distinction.
So that question or that type of question is included, again, at the high school level, but
Not at the middle school.
I believe they were thinking it's not quite developmentally appropriate. Not that it's not happening,
I know.
but again, having a sixth grader.
I understand, I understand. I was, to be honest with you, I was
read
surprised to
through
even
this.
see it here.
Yeah.
Spelled out so much, so,
Yeah.
at that level.
Ms. McGee?
Yeah, so, kind of going back to what Kathy was asking Tony
Yep.
about, and I understand some questions are not, you can't change the wording, but
Mhm.
question 4 is, are you Hispanic or Latino? Like, why do we call that out? Like, I kind of, like, couldn't we say, what is your race, and make an F, Hispanic or Latino? Why do we separate that as a question? And why isn't that just an option under question 5? And that would free up a question, frankly.
That is how the state receives its information. So even on our registration paperwork, those are fields that are provided by the state.
So they're
So Hispanic or Latino, yes, no, and then your race. That's the same exact format the state uses
So that to me is like,
demographically.
I find that almost offensive, frankly. If nothing else, I would say, what is your race should be first, that question. That's interesting that the state actually asks if you're Hispanic or Latino first, and then asks, what is your race? I don't, that to me, I could see potentially somebody of a Hispanic or Latino would find that offensive. I don't know. I just thought that was odd. So if you can't change it, I understand, but I just thought from an order standpoint, and, okay, and you can't combine them, but I just found that odd. The other thing I just generally questioning, Tony, was the order. I don't philosophically have a problem with any of the questions, but the order in which I feel like we jumped from, like, rollerblading and wearing a helmet and riding a bike to suicide. Like, I thought that was aggressive. I mean, I felt like, could we do a build-up here? I mean, I was a little surprised that our questions 14 through 16 are about suicide. Like, I would almost put that at the end. I'd like to think there's minimal kids that are going to respond, but I just found that was like, wow. Yeah. We jumped from, and bullying is right there too, and that's fine, but we kind of jumped from wearing a helmet and riding a bicycle to suicide. Seemed aggressive. I don't know.
Again, the order, I do think I'll be able to change the order around.
Yeah, and maybe I'm the only one that thinks that way.
The survey.
Actually, I think it's a good point.
I would almost put that at the end.
The survey came from the CDC in this order.
That's what I was wondering.
I mean, I deleted a few and inserted a few, but as you can see, it's organized by section. The next 3 questions,
and I have no problem with that.
4 questions.
Right.
And so.
I just felt like almost, if I was a middle schooler, I mean, I'm far from that, but because it is obviously voluntary and you can jump questions. I'm wondering if I was a middle schooler, would I be like so freaked out by those questions that I may not finish the rest of the survey, or be like, oh, this isn't me, or I don't know. I just, if we have the ability, I would just ask you again. You guys know
That would be a question for Celeste.
Yeah,
Again,
okay.
we are.
And I might be the only one that thinks this way, but
this will be the first district that's doing this middle school survey, and again, that really puts us at the forefront of.
I kind of almost think,
and
like, when we're talking about risky behavior, I would almost, in my mind, like, do a build-up. Start with, whatever, cigarettes, and then alcohol, and then prescription drugs, and kind of go in a pattern that leads towards riskier behavior that the average person, the average adult would. I mean, it's all risky, obviously.
Yeah.
Period. But I just was, the order did not resonate with me. I guess the order of the questions didn't necessarily resonate to me as, like, is that the path that would be appropriate for a middle schooler? It's just a thought.
I'm in regular contact with Celeste from the state, and I will inquire about that. There is the whole subjectivity of which is riskier. For one person, it might be more than another, but if I get the okay, yep, you could rearrange the questions.
And I'm not trying to
orders.
drive you crazy here.
No, not at all. Not at all. Again, this is a very sensitive topic.
Oh,
And
all
being
of
the
them are.
being the first district to do this, we have to really be very careful with what we're doing.
I
And
agree.
make sure
And
there's a lot of thought into it. So,
That's exactly why I'm thinking that way, Tony.
yeah,
that
so
I-
you're not driving me crazy.
Yeah,
It's
I
going to
want-
help
I'm just thinking,
do
you know,
this right.
you want to get as authentic information as
Yeah.
possible, and I just don't, in my mind, I don't want kids.
I will say, to that point, again, Scott Robinson and Chrissy Rich, two amazing middle school health teachers, they both looked through it, and they really didn't have any concerns
Okay,
of that
and
nature.
that's fine.
But again, I'll bring it to
Just a
to
thought,
Celeste,
and
yeah.
you know, I'm not going to die on the hill on it, but I just
Yeah.
thought, it stuck out in my mind, and I just thought I'd share my
Certainly.
perspective on it. But otherwise, I think it's amazing, and, you know, I applaud the fact that we're taking these steps,
Yeah.
and I thank you for the working with Celeste. I think it's a phenomenal thing we're doing, and, you know, if people are really going to be honest about saying, do we know who our middle schoolers and our high schoolers are and what our potential problems, and really trying to be aggressive in understanding and best ways to support our students so that they are successful. You know, sometimes you need to do these kinds of things, because otherwise how else do you know? So I think it's a huge step, and I support it.
Thank you, Roxanne. Just so we all know, I've written our initials down in the order that I see your hands. So Roxanne, then myself, Karen, Ray Ross, Patty, Mike Votto, Tammy. I have a significant concern with the sixth grade.
That was my question.
So our sixth graders, many of them are 10, and they cannot turn 11 until December 31st. So we have a different standard than other states that may be taking this, because other states, the cutoff is September 1st. So we have sixth graders taking this survey, and by October 30th, only a third of them will have had some health. So we have 2/3 of our sixth grade classes that don't even have health, and then are given this survey. So I'm wondering if there's a way to narrow this survey to 7th and 8th graders. I'm really concerned about some of the topics here for a 10-year-old, even a young 11-year-old, that they may or may not have any exposure to.
That was my
So is this
question.
an all or nothing 6th to 8th grade survey?
No,
This is
absolutely
something
not.
that-
This is for us to decide how we want to implement it and how we want to use it.
Because, you know, you mentioned other middle schools, I mean, out of state, not in Connecticut.
Right.
You know, some middle schools are 7, 8, 9. Because my question, even though I'm jumping ahead here, was the same as yours.
And you're on the bottom of it.
I know. I'll take seniority, I'll throw that in. That was my question, and because I think they are very young, believe me, I think I'm not saying these problems don't happen in 6th grade, because they do.
Right.
I was a middle school teacher for many, many years. Aaron, what if it was taken at the end of the 6th grade year? I mean, would that make any difference, or should we just, I don't know.
I don't know
Because
if
they-
that's gonna help in them, I mean.
Because they'll
So-
go through a
so-
whole year of middle school, and
Yeah.
they learn a lot of things, they see things happen, they
Yep.
copycat.
And
You
they
know,
have-
it might be certainly a difference from September to June.
Definitely, and definitely, they're coming out of 5th grade where they have one health lesson, maybe, with, you know, the male
They have-
PE teacher comes up to Rock Hill and.
Oh, they have multiple.
No,
health
they have,
lessons.
hold on,
health
they have
lessons.
multiple health lessons. They have one human growth and development lesson where the male PE teacher takes the boys and
Right.
the nurse takes the girls, and that
Remember that?
letter is
Topic.
communicated. It
Hot
is,
topic in my
it's a
house
big
last
deal
year.
that day. But there are more than just that one health lesson.
So as far as the district goes, well, as far as the state goes, at the high school level, the Connecticut School Health Survey, Youth Risk Behavior Survey, is typically administered near the end of the year. And it was Wallingford's choice back in 2013 to have this occur in the fall in order to get the results early enough for the previous or the upcoming school year. And so Wallingford has always done it in the fall. The discussion around the middle school survey was to do it on the exact same day for those parents that may have a kid in the middle school and the high school, so it prevents confusion and misunderstanding what's going on if it's done at different times. But, so that's just the history of it, but if pushing it to the end of the year means the board is more comfortable with the sixth graders taking it, then that would be my vote, because then we'll have a much larger data set and a lot more information that we can learn from and use to adjust our health curriculum.
Thank you. Karen?
Okay, so we have done this at the high schools, but this is a much younger population.
Yeah.
And there are many sensitive topics that are
Yep.
covered in this survey. So I guess my concern is I want parents to be very well aware. And I'm not so sure if I'm comfortable with an opt-out form rather than an opt-in form.
So the passive opt-out is one that was discussed, from my understanding, historically here in Wallingford, and it was a way to increase participation. And again, to be consistent with the high school, that was a conscious choice at the high school level to have it be a passive opt-out.
Yeah.
And again, for consistency reasons, and if there's a parent that has a student at the middle school and the high school, just simplicity of, wait, for this one I have to opt out, but this one I'm already, I have to opt in.
I'm not looking to confuse anyone, but I
Yeah.
want parents to be really informed about what their child is taking and do they feel it's appropriate for that child to take it. They know their child best, and they know if clearly, some parents, quite a few parents, do work. And so they might not be able to come and view the survey at the administration, at the child's school, or to sign that opt-out form at the child's school.
Another option that was raised by Celeste, and at the time I said, well, I think it's best for us to be consistent with the high school, was taking a PDF of the survey and putting it on the school site, and then directing parents, if you'd like to see the survey, you can go to this site and look at the survey. That's another option, that's another possibility.
I think the more parents are informed so that they know what their child is being asked, and they, have the opportunity to see what's in it, and to opt in or opt out, I think that's, in my view, the better choice.
Again, I'm open to expanding the opportunity for parents to see it via, it's on a PDF at the school site. I do think we should be firm with the opt-out form being consistent with the high school level to make sure we have really high participation rates.
Right, but they would have the opportunity, if they're putting that PDF on, that they would also have that reminder that if you feel this is a concern for you, you can opt your child out.
Yes.
Because, like I say, some folks
And
just don't have the ability to go to the office.
I thought that was clear in the letter, but maybe not.
I'm looking at this. You are welcome to view the survey prior to administration at your child's school.
Yes.
And opt-out forms can be signed there too. That sounds to me like you have to go to the school and sign the opt-out form.
Right.
And that, I want parents to be fully informed about what's going on for their child so that they can make the informed decision.
Okay. So yeah, we can expand, certainly.
Mr. Ross?
You're up. My question was answered. I'll yield to Dr. Menzo my time.
But he's not, no, that's not order. He's last, I think.
Yeah, but
He
you
is,
were
you're right.
last
You
and
went
you
out of order
called
there, Mr.
seniority.
Okay.
So why can't
I
we
wasn't
call?
done.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. Menzo.
All I was going to say is that our past record with giving this survey or administering this survey at the high school has been very positive. We have not had any repercussions or backlash from families. I think families felt they were communicated with in an appropriate manner. I would say that this, I agree, having been a middle school teacher, a middle school administrator, I agree we need to to ratchet it up even another notch to make sure it's communicated. But again, I wouldn't expect any different outcome than we had with the high school.
I'm
No,
not,
I'm not saying you
that.
aren't.
I just want that opportunity
Absolutely.
to be there for parents to see
Absolutely.
this so that they know what's being administered. And if they feel it's a little too much for their child, or it's a sensitive nature that they feel is going to cause an issue, that they have the opportunity to opt them out.
I would also recommend, because of the fact that the data, I think we put in here a little bit, the data has led to specific programs that have successfully helped our students. Maybe even expand upon that a little bit more. I know we're trying to stick to one page because it's easier. But I think there really has, and again, this is not a critique of anything that was said here tonight. I just think it's a very value-added information that we received as a community. And I think that there are communities who have not done this, obviously, at the high school level, never mind the middle school level. And as a result, those communities don't necessarily see the changes that our community has, and I think we're very fortunate in that regard. So I just wanted to say that again, I think the communication is essential. I think, I know that I came in on the discussion about moving it maybe to the spring. I personally like that idea, just because I think that the middle school students, knowing a sixth grader, they're really still a fifth grader right now. And that's not anything other than that's what they are. That's just how they are. By the end of sixth grade, they think they're an eighth grader. But the reality is that they're a little bit more mature. We can use that data. And I think that the initial survey when we did the high school, we're kind of counter the traditional setting of that, but that was because we wanted to act on the data quickly. So I think this one we could, even though we wanted to be in alignment, I think developmentally I would concur that I think at the end of the year would be better. It also gives us multiple opportunities to share with parents, and not just from the district level, because this communication really should be coming from the teacher level as well. So working with the health teachers at the middle schools who are exceptional, working with the building administrators to put it in their weekly or whatever it is, updates that they do, then that gives a multi-pronged approach to get the communication out to families.
Ms. Purcell?
Okay, I have a few things, but first off, thank you for making all those changes. But second off, I wanted to just say, I know we want consistency, and I think communication, like you brought up, Ms. Havlick, is important, because in fifth grade, they signed a permission slip to go to have that family life. So then they go to sixth grade and it changes. So that's, and I know we're trying to be consistent with the high school, but from where their history is going to be that they did have to sign something. So we do need to kind of make sure that they really, either they have the opt-in in sixth grade and then starting seventh, we switch over, or we just do a really good job communicating that. So that's one part. The second thing I want to say is I agree with Ms. McKay. In the order, we can certainly change the order to start with things that they see, the vaping they see, the things that, the eating the breakfast, the things that are regularly happening in their life, and then grow from there to things that they may not be seeing or being aware of. And I think that you're going to get somebody who's more, listening to what's going on at that point. And I forgot my third point. I'll have to come back.
I'll circle back around. Ms. Raccio?
Thanks. Tony, the letter, so I understand the bullets are really the topics that came from the CDC survey, but we have a lot of extra space here. I'm wondering if we could add in the bullets for the topics that we added, because now we're asking questions about gambling, suicide. I don't see bullying listed here, and then self-harm.
Yeah, and the bullets were pulled
I know.
directly from the
I know.
CDC website
yep.
to try and be consistent with
Yep.
what people
But
may
since
look
we
up.
modified it, we could probably
yes,
modify that
absolutely.
to match the
Yep,
survey.
absolutely.
So that parents know in the cover letter that there's questions about suicide.
Okay.
And that a 10-year-old's going to be asked about
And
suicide.
we added a lot. We added gambling. We added school
Yep.
connectedness. We
Yep.
added self-harm. So it was impossible to, and we can't put every single topic that we have on that letter, but I certainly, I agree that suicide, for example, or bullying should be, could be a part of that in the front.
And then I have a couple more. Will this be in Spanish?
Yes.
Okay. Large print, online, tech-friendly?
That I have to look into.
Why online?
For dysgraphic students who use technology and don't write?
Oh, online meaning that way. I
Yeah.
thought you meant something different.
Yeah.
The survey is not online. The
No,
last one.
but can an image be loaded for students to take it who don't write?
We could check on that. That we had gone down this road before with the State Department, and there might be changes that have been made, but
Okay.
we'll check on that. I'm not certain.
Will copies also be at YSS like last time?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm assuming after tonight, will this be in the board packet and will this be online through the board packet?
Well,
or no? When you put the meeting materials online?
Oh,
will
as the
this-
backup materials?
Yeah.
Originally, I wouldn't have, because we keep the survey, we weren't publishing the survey,
Okay.
but then Tony had just shared that you could put it on the school website, so it was a question I already wrote down to ask him.
That was my question,
Okay.
too.
And then I was going to ask about PTAC, if this could be on the PTAC agendas. And then I know,
I think it would be great at both middle schools.
Open
So-
houses.
So we'll put it on the middle school PTAC agendas.
And then their open houses are coming up in a
we
few
could ask
weeks
that.
too, so that would be a great opportunity.
As far as the open houses go, and where during the open house would that be shared? Isn't that typically a,
In health class, probably.
in the health classes?
That would would seem to be
Okay.
the most
And
logical.
yeah, and they would
Yeah,
be
and then all
happy to-
students have health.
Yeah, okay.
3 years. So.
And-
oh, go ahead.
And I just share with Mrs. Levesque, is that I just want to make sure parents have every opportunity to see this.
Yep.
I'm totally fine with whoever wants to opt out. I would rather see this be an opt-in. I know that the Board of Ed in Cheshire is considering opt-in after the feedback they got from their first middle school survey that was opt-out. And it
we were the
wasn't
one that-
very good. It started in 7th grade.
Yep.
Yeah, and there was
And
a lot of
that
publicity
wasn't-
about that.
That wasn't conducted in conjunction with the Connecticut
And
Department
it
of
was not a
Health,
CDC.
and,
I
It
get
had
that.
a lot of the same topics.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think we did a good job in really, if you Google it, you'll find the CDC survey, the first version that we got a while ago. But we did a good job, I think, in taking out some of the questions that we just felt weren't developmentally appropriate. So I would want parents to get their hands on our version of it because I think it fits our kids better.
I don't disagree.
And I wouldn't want them to say, oh, I have to go to the school to get it. Let me just Google it and see what comes up. Because
Yeah.
you're not going to get the real version that way. And I really think ours is better. And it's more reflective of our student population. So, I'm of the mindset of opt-in. I'd like to skip the 6th grade 10-year-olds. And I'd like to just make it visible and totally transparent for parents to look at it in advance, because that's the way you're going to have the great conversations. Because you may have a child who comes home silent and is scared to death after what they've read.
Yeah. Thank you. for
So
that.
in terms of moving,
Oh,
Mr.
we got
Votto?
Mike.
I am also in favor of the end, as Dr. Menzel mentioned, at the end of the year, because especially if we're going to include 6th graders.
Yeah.
Because I look at some of these things, I'm sure some, there are families that are very, very conservative, and children don't know about some of these things. They've never heard about Vicodin, But probably by the end of 6th grade, unfortunately, and being in a middle school, they might hear some of these things. I'm really stuck on that one, because it was the same thing when I taught 6th grade. What things do you bring up and what things don't you bring up? As far as putting it on the website for parents to see, would that in some way skew the results? In other words, would they share with their children what was on here ahead of time?
I asked that exact question to Celeste, and that wasn't a concern of hers.
Was or wasn't?
Was not a concern of hers. She said if in some ways, in some instances, it may, but the amount of students that we have taking this, the chances are our data, well, we know it's not the chances. Our data is very valid and very reliable, because they do cross comparisons, and there's a process of going through, I think 3 or 4 times they go through every kid's survey to look for irregularities, and they are quick to drop students
Yeah, you said that before,
that it looks like they put all C's, something like that, and having the kids look at it beforehand, we would prefer that doesn't happen, but let's play that out. a parent is concerned, they show their kid, the kid sees all the questions, they go in and the parent decides, oh, all right, you can take it. So they're just aware of it ahead of time. Emphasizing to the students that it's anonymous, we're not collecting any names, you could skip any question you want. How it's rolled out to the students by the classroom teacher, I think, is vital for getting that true response from them. And they will be coached, they will be taught exactly what to say, how to say it. And in the past, Celeste has gone into the schools to help with that. I'll take on that mantle, that role this time around, and I'll ask Mr. Piacentini and Mr. Snyder to go in, maybe talk during a faculty meeting and say, all right, here's your script, here's why we're doing this, here's what we've done with the data, and really impress upon the teachers the importance of reading that script and taking it seriously and having their classes take it seriously. And so to sum up my very long response, I don't think having the kids see it beforehand from a parent showing them is going to skew the results.
Okay. My next question is, somebody mentioned, bringing it up maybe at open house. I would really hope that it would just be from the health teachers when the parents go into those classrooms, they might mention this is coming up. I don't think it should be a big school thing. I don't know how principals do it.
I guess the other thing is, as I reflect on saying health teachers and open house, which is next week, it's premature.
Yeah, we're not ready for that.
I don't think we're ready for it yet either, because I don't think our teachers
fine
are
with me.
well versed enough in this concept just yet, and I don't think we don't.
I'm with you.
I
I'm
think we're
fine.
just not ready there yet.
Okay.
Just my feeling.
I agree.
I don't know if we disagree or you can't disagree.
I had a flag as soon as you said open house, but, and the other thing is.
Initially, I thought it was, but now as I'm reflecting on, like you were just saying, you would go in and talk to the teachers. You're not going to be able to get there before.
Right.
No.
then.
And I wouldn't want to do that. That wouldn't occur until
We're
as
ready to
close
go
to
for it, yeah.
the administration as possible, so
right.
it stays fresh.
Are
for
We
the
might
teachers.
cause more confusion by.
I want to
the
ask.
times.
I have another question.
Ask Mrs. Corso if, before we do maybe one of the first things we need to do is to take a vote as far as giving it to sixth graders at all. And then maybe if you wanted to give sixth graders, would it be better to do it at the end of the year? I think you need to know those two things before we can approve the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure we're even at the point of approval at all yet. More discussion perhaps is needed, Mrs. Purcell?
Okay, I just had a couple things. Talking about, again, how to communicate it to parents. If you just put this on the website and you're wanting to click in, obviously, any student could click in at any age.
Yes.
It's just on the website, even fourth or third or fifth, whatever. So my question is, could either an email go to parents of middle schools with a link saying, this is what this letter, go out as an email with a link so that the parent can access it if they choose to? Might be the easiest way, or could it go through Power School somehow, rather than just have it wide open that anybody at any age could?
I think that's a great idea. I think that's the best solution, because no one can say, I wasn't aware of this. We are saying, here it is.
Yeah.
This is what's going to be done. So I like that idea a lot. Yeah.
I had one.
Go ahead.
The other thing, and I don't know if this can be done, but I know Ms. Castelli talked about the sexual questions and what if someone forced themselves or whatever. I don't know if there's either right at the top of that section or at the bottom of the thing, if there's just a reminder to say, if anybody touched you inappropriately or forced you, please report to an adult you can trust, if that can be worded in there somewhere.
Without it being a question.
Yeah, that'd be a question, just a statement.
Yeah,
Just remind them they have an option.
To report to an adult they trust.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Actually, that could come after a couple of sessions.
Yeah.
Well,
actually, that's
whichever,
true.
I think that would be a nice thing to just keep reminding.
Yep.
Well, right, and
You
just,
could almost say it for every section, to be honest with you.
whichever,
That one.
whatever, but just to constantly let them know we care, and that's why we're doing this. We're not trying to catch you being bad, we're trying to help you.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And I
So-
think that could be included in the teacher facilitation guide, to maybe say a couple of those comments, or we'll give them the exact line that we want them to say. Say this beforehand, say this at the end, something along those lines
But there's power about reading it on your own,
Yeah.
to Patty's point.
Well, So we also are discussing this survey as being written specifically for middle school students. So in terms of opting in or opting out, if it's written specifically for middle school students, then I think we need to, I don't think it needs to be married to the high school agenda in terms of, you know, because the high school is, you don't have to opt into it, then the middle school we don't have to, or the time frame doesn't have to necessarily be the same. The important piece that we're trying to get is usable data, which I think that's also a really important piece that we need to communicate to parents why this is happening. Like, why do we need this data from 7th and 8th graders, or 6th if we opt in? But I think it needs to be different than the high school, because it is a different developmental population. I'm not certain that we're ready tonight to approve anything. I'm wondering if more conversation is needed at a different, if you can come back with.
Yeah.
Yes, Mrs. Still.
If I can make a comment quick about the opting in and opting out, my fear, my concern, if we do an opt-in, is we will not have enough participation to have valid data. And the research is clear, no matter what type of research you're doing, a passive opt-in or opt-out always historically results in much higher participation rates. And I would hate to do this and go through all of this, and then we have such a small data set that we can't use the information.
I agree.
Ms. Castelli?
I agree as well. I like the opt-out approach better, but as another possible alternative, what if we sent a letter home that you have to either opt in or opt out? In other words, everyone, we'd have to get a letter from everyone, either they're opting in
What
or they're
happens
opting
if they
out.
do neither?
Right.
Yeah, you're basically.
Well, then you hound them. Where's your answer? We need an answer from every,
Yeah, we're not
every,
gonna-
yeah,
You're not gonna
okay.
get that.
Okay, like I said, I'm just trying to throw that up. I'm okay with the opt-out.
And
I agree. I think you'll get more
I appreciate it,
participation
and
that way.
I think sending the letter home early enough. Let's say the board does decide at an appropriate time that, okay, we are going to do this in the spring. We send that letter out months in advance. We follow up with reminder emails, and each time we send a reminder email, it has the survey in there for the parent specifically, and we give them many opportunities to look at it and to decide if they would like their child to opt out. Giving them enough time to make that decision could go a long way.
And I just want to make another comment with respect to if anybody's watching and concerned about people that don't have access to email. My understanding from Mrs. Latour is that like 99% of all our households do have a connection to be able to see things online. So that should not be a concern with respect to getting this information out.
Thank you. Ms. Purcell?
No, I agree with you that if we email people and we show them that we've given them enough time, the opt-out is fine. But I do want to just say, can we just kind of ask people if they're ready to take consensus or not, rather than just say we're not ready?
I was gonna.
What are we taking consensus
On whether we're going to, go ahead.
What I was gonna ask is that or make a statement that if we're not gonna vote on this tonight, because we all had some things, does that assume, because it won't be ready for the fall then,
Right.
that this will take place in the spring? That would be maybe one decision we make tonight.
Can we take consensus on that then?
Yeah, I'm.
On whether we want to give it
it's
the
up to the
spring?
group.
Are we giving it in the spring to all, or just to 7th and 8th grade?
You mean 6th? I thought
To all 6th,
oh,
7th, and
got it.
8th, or
Yeah,
just
yeah,
to 7th and 8th? We need to know the time frame, who we're giving it to, and the opting in and out question, aside from any revisions that are happening within the survey.
Well, can we just do one tonight?
Sure.
Or do we have to do all three of those?
No, I'm just saying
we
that
can
those are the
start.
three things that are, those are the
Right,
three
okay.
questions coming up.
Why not try to do all three?
Why not try to do all
Okay,
three?
so let's
Keep
start with, take consensus on,
You have a couple of questions.
Ray.
I thought the whole purpose of waiting till the spring was so we could do the 6th graders. Because they'd had the whole year under their belt. So if we go to spring, I would assume we would do all 3 grades.
I still wouldn't want, regardless.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I just have a comment about the
Yeah.
Power School thing. again, we put a lot of effort into getting this survey customized for our students. And I would, if somebody's address isn't up in Power School, right, I wouldn't want them to be out there Googling to try to look for a survey. They just type in CDC Middle School Risk Survey and they're gonna get the wrong one.
I was gonna make mention of that maybe somewhere in the letter it should say, I don't know where, but, you know, please do not Google this because it's different than ours, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe we
But
need
if
to
it
make.
was-
Yeah, I could,
If we-
that's an
if you think
easy,
we need to make
that's an
that
easy
clear.
adjustment, very simple adjustment.
Yeah.
Can a consensus happen? Can it be an either or does it have to be a yes or no?
I don't know, what's your question?
So,
not
if we're taking consensus on something, can we take consensus on giving it to 6th, 7th, and 8th, or just 7th and 8th? Or do we have to take consensus on, do we wanna give it to the 6th grade? Yes or no?
confusing.
Yeah, I do.
You
I
want
mean,
the same result, so just say, do you wanna give it to the 6th graders?
Yeah, why don't you just
get the
ask-
same
6th
result.
graders, okay.
Yeah, well,
Start
but
with that?
6th grade in fall or spring.
Don't you two get involved with your no yeses.
Well, can we just say, I mean, can we just say, you know, I'm fine with 6th grade in the spring.
Well, then you have to tailor your consensus question accordingly.
You have to tally.
Because that's a two-part question.
Right.
I would keep them separate personally, but,
I think so too.
Okay.
yeah, I would.
Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask is, would you like to give this survey to 6th graders? Would you like to give the survey to 6th graders? No, you don't like that?
See,
No.
my answer would be yes, but I'm gonna say
In the spring.
as long as
So
it's done in the spring.
So let's do
So I don't know
spring
how-
versus fall first?
Just
Yeah, okay, that'll be good for
start-
everybody,
Just do spring, because it sounds like.
Spring.
for all grades if we're,
Well,
whatever.
I mean, I guess in essence, though, you might, should your question first be, can you move forward on this survey? Because that's the overarching question, isn't it? Because if you can't be in support of the survey, you're definitely not going to be in support of 6th graders.
Okay.
What's that?
I'm in support of the survey without 6th grade.
Well, you're,
No.
okay, that,
Just, you wanna know if we just agree with what we talked about tonight as far as
With
making
revisions.
changes? and
well, I don't know what the revisions
Yep.
are. So how do
That's
I,
right.
I don't even know what the
Then we
revisions
can't vote on
are.
it.
So
Boy, oh
to
boy.
be honest with
I
you.
think you should just table it.
Table
Yeah,
it.
I'll be honest
I
with
think
you.
it was a nice attempt of trying to accomplish something. I really do.
I
But I think there's a lot
just-
of questions that we still need to clarify. We need to
Right.
revise the letter.
Yes.
You know, add those other statements.
Yes.
You know, go through that. I think it's best to do that because
Yeah.
you're acting prematurely, and I don't think that it serves.
And my
anybody
answer
well.
might be different depending on how the final survey looks like. So I think that's your overarching
let's-
question.
We have time, and then the spring becomes inevitable, as Ray said.
And that's okay. I mean, we're still ahead of every other district in the state, right?
Which
If
is
we
fine.
move forward.
If we move forward with it.
If we move forward, yeah. Wow,
Okay,
we
so we'll
tabled a
table
lot
this.
tonight. I'm sorry God, we kind of created extra work, but that's important. It is important.
Sorry, Tony.
That's
Yeah,
all right,
sorry,
no
Tim.
worries.
But you've got a lot to.
Thank you for your work.
But you've got a lot to, like, I would also add, I'm gonna be another place card holder here. I mean, for, October's, is that reasonable to say to come back? Or what would be the next steps? I do want that for.
I don't see it until
That's-
November, to be
Okay.
honest, because
Okay, that's
October's
fine.
pretty full.
Which
Okay.
says we're gonna do it in the spring.
We're
So-
not in a hurry, right?
So, but I want the expectations of board members to be, we're all on the same page that by tabling this, it'll be probably not till November.
Correct.
And I just make sure everybody's okay with that.
Because it doesn't impact high school next month.
No.
No.
It doesn't have any impact.
Right.
So we're tabling it to the November, just for my.
But that's what
Yes.
I want to know for you.
Later this fall.
Yeah.
We
Later
can
this
table it to
fall.
tomorrow, we can table it to November.
Right, I just want to know
I'll have
that.
it ready.
I want you to know what the expectation
okay,
is for your
November.
sake.
For tabling it till November, I guess that means we're not gonna give it till the spring, though.
So moving to the next agenda item.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Loomis.
Hold on, I mean,
It's a long time. Graduation requirements and standards of mastery. Mrs. Latour.
So this is the first read for this policy change. As we spoke last fall extensively when the state came out with its new statute, the different buckets, we had many meetings in which we talked about the different requirements that fell into each buckets. This is memorializing those conversations into policy. So as you know, the first...
Is it dead? That kinda
No,
scared
hopefully
me.
not. I'm sure we will resuscitate it constantly. Okay.
Sorry, guys.
So the shaded parts of this are the things that we added as in typical fashion, and the strikeouts are what we removed. So if we tried to model the policy after really what's in our program of studies, just so that the two are identical. So we added the promotion requirements that are in existence right now. We added, beginning with the graduating class of 2023, which is our freshman class, all of the different buckets, what different courses and credits make up those buckets. So you see humanities, you see STEM, the community service. I do want to point out, we struck out beginning with the class of 2018 and 2019, since those classes have since graduated, and we're carrying on with, carrying over credit into high school for world language completion at the middle school, and the same goes with the completion of Algebra 1 at the middle school as well. We did add, for math in particular, that they should have completed algebra with the grade of a C or better in order to receive their graduation requirement credit for high school. And then the section below that speaks to different opportunities for high school students for graduation credit. Dual enrollment and early college experience, courses taken in the middle school as we outlined above, student-designed independent studies and internships, certified pre-apprenticeship opportunities, again, provided that such demonstration of mastery is in accordance with the statewide subject matter standards and receives prior approval from the building principal. The high school graduation credit for coursework completed in college, there are certain requirements that the state requires in order for that to occur. Those are listed in the policy. So those just highlight the different changes that we made to our existing policy. Are there any questions?
First read.
This is the first read. So,
I'm going to start.
Okay.
Quick question. Well, I have a couple questions.
You're supposed to go last.
I put my
technically
name on
speaking.
there.
It
I
doesn't
put my
matter.
PC
That
right
doesn't
here.
matter. When you
PC.
run a meeting, you're supposed to go last, but go ahead, Erin. It's your prerogative
Am I
as
not
running the
following
meeting, I
Robert-
guess.
am I following Robert's
She might
rules
ask
or
my
no?
question,
No,
so
you're
go
not.
for it.
It's not good.
This is my
It's not
thing.
fun.
This is my thing.
Go for it.
In terms of the geometry piece,
It's
if you get a
not
C or
fun.
better in Algebra 1 in middle school, you have to then take geometry in order for that credit to count.
Yeah, that's one.
Because I thought we were talking about more flexible, we had really talked about geometry in general and whether or not that was the
Could you repeat your
full year course. If you take Algebra 1 in middle school and earn the credit, it says if you have to continue their study of math with geometry.
right, the
So-
math management team, as you know, we have the management team structure, felt very strongly that in order for the middle school algebra to count towards high school credit, it should be followed with the geometry piece. That was their recommendation, and remember, our management team structure is comprised of math teachers throughout the district. They are the ones to make those recommendations, and they asked for this change within policy.
I thought we were rethinking geometry as a full year course in
It
general.
is.
No?
No, I don't
It's
think
not a
so.
full year course.
Okay, that was one. No, we're rethinking it as a full year course, less than 5% of the SAT. Anyhow, next, my other question is the credits that students earn in middle school, will the grade count towards their GPA? Grade that they get,
No.
they get an A in the middle school, they earn high school credit, does that count towards their GPA?
No, the credit counts towards graduation requirements, it does not.
Not GPA.
It is not GPA.
Thank you. Mrs. McKay?
No, I didn't have any questions. I was just, you're out of order, that's all. I was just giving you a rash. I'm having fun with you. It's all
Ms.
good.
Purcell?
But thank you.
I feel your pain because when you weren't here one time and it was a health thing, I had to wait to the end and it was tough.
You didn't have to.
Well,
You're right.
okay. Anyway, my question was, well, first off, I do want to say, we did a little bit talk about the geometry, but we didn't put it in place. We didn't put it in place yet. We were talking about for future doing the data analysis and geometry, but it wasn't there yet. the thing about the, where they get credit for internships and all that kind of stuff, which I think is awesome, but how much credit, like, how does, is it,
How many points they
how many points do they get for those? Or is that subjective, or I don't know?
I think at this point, we listed it in the policy because the state regulation does allow for that. If you notice in the policy, we started with the class of 2023, which is our current freshman class, which gives us a little bit of time to process through that, both at the district level, but at the board level as well. Because every internship is not created the same.
Right.
So we are going to need to come up with some
Criteria.
some guidelines and some protocols for the internship and the independent studies, but it's important to note it in the policy because it is allowable under the state, and we do need to start having those conversations about what that looks like and how it's going to run, because we have many students participating in internships of varying length and opportunity, and so we need to start to identify how and if and how those will count towards graduation requirement and credit.
Thank you.
Ms. Raggio?
Have the, or I don't know if they've been on this committee to see this, the guidance counselors seen the community service piece of this?
The community service piece of it currently
I'm just wondering if
is
they
our
have any,
current practice.
and I don't know if they have any input to clarify some of that, because that may be our current policy. I'm not sure it's our current practice. So that would just be my question on that. Then on page 3, the last line, where we're talking about dual enrollment, the course and credit will be posted on the student's transcript upon the school's receipt of the student's college transcript. That's problematic for seniors. So if seniors are taking courses at a college and you need to report out your first term grades, it is helpful to show all of the courses that the student is enrolled in, even though you may be reporting out around Thanksgiving time and you don't get that college grade till January. It still shows the colleges that you're applying to what your course load is. So you know where I'm at with this.
I do.
Been there, done that.
So there's a couple of ways around this. One, we're working with IT to determine, is there a generic course that could be uploaded into PowerSchool that would kind of resolve that? It doesn't get into specifics, because if we did get into specifics, we would need to create a course for every potential college class a student may take. There's also a way through Common App to upload your unofficial college transcripts, so colleges that you're applying to would be able to see if you're enrolled in a college class and taking it, and it would be very specific as to the actual course name. And so as a student is applying for school, they would have the responsibility to upload that transcript to Common App, and then it would become part of that child's application. So those are kind of the two ways that we can work around. But with the IT piece, I just need to get into greater detail with Karen Bayou, our IT director, to see kind of what that might look like. A generic class that just says college course isn't giving that college that a student is applying to really all the information they need. The way to really go would be doing it through the Common App, which is very specific and very
They may not be looking
detailed.
for Common App stuff when they're reviewing first term grades. So that's
Right.
just, I know, we want to do what's best for the student.
Of
and
course.
that's just kind of that, there's a gap there, and I think it only matters for that first term senior year. And then it doesn't matter after that.
Is work in progress reported on a transcript when in the fall? Like the classes that they're currently taking, does that
Yes.
appear on the transcript?
Yep.
So if a student is involved in a student internship, is that reported? Like student internship that they're undergoing, is that reported on the transcript?
I don't know. I'd have to check, to be honest. I don't know about the internship.
I'm
But
just-
all of the courses that are reflected on the child's schedule are reflected on that first quarter transcript. It just doesn't have a grade.
Right.
It just lists scheduled classes.
Right. I do think it's important to figure out IT-wise somehow how to
Yeah.
get work in progress. If it's an approved work in progress that's happening, it's important to get that on the transcript.
Agreed.
And right now, the only addition to this that I would suggest is that where it says certified pre-apprenticeship program or opportunities, it's state certified, so we should add the word state there. That would be the only one right now, and we don't have, because we're a year out from it, we got approved this year, but it'll actually kick into place next fall with our cohort of students finishing the coursework this year. But those students would actually, that would be an actual course, because we would be coming and suggesting that they would be getting credit, be it a half credit, whatever it may be. So that would help in that area. The informal internships, that's what we have to still work out.
Yeah.
Because those are the ones that they're not part of an actual accredited program from the State Department of Labor, but they would be coming under the guidance of our school and career counselors.
Right.
Yeah.
So as with any first read, I know you're digesting this and digesting the conversation. If you have any reflections or revisions that you'd like to see for the second read, which will be at the full board meeting at the end of the month, please make sure you forward them to my attention.
The second read is the full board, the regular board meeting?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Can I-
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, Carrie, I know you said, obviously, when you're looking at these independent studies, class of 2023, obviously they're freshmen, and we do have a little gift of time.
Yes.
But what in your mind, because eventually, you know, certainly by entering your junior year, you better have a pretty good arm around how many credits you have and what do you need to make sure you are in line to graduation. So I guess my question is, you know, you do have wiggle room, and I'm great, and, you know, that's great. But when does that wiggle room go away in your mind? Not to put you on the
Sooner rather
spot.
than later, to be quite honest.
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, just getting consensus on the different credits and what buckets they fall in and all of that, we did all of that heavy lifting last year.
Sure.
This year, the heavy lifting will be with the internships, the independent studies, and having a guideline, because you do want to be flexible, you want to be able to provide variety, but there needs to be certain things in place in terms of length of time, for example.
Sure.
You know, a 6-week internship is very different than a semester internship. And what would, you know, there are guidelines in terms of how many hours of study are required for it to meet credit, that type of thing.
That's reasonable.
So, yep.
Yeah, I just want to be cognizant, so we are sensitive to that for
Absolutely.
our students, so that, and our guidance people and everybody, you know, so for planning purposes. Thanks.
question?
Mr. Votto?
Dr. Menzel, where did you say to insert the word state?
The last,
Page 3.
the last bullet, it should be state certified pre-apprenticeship.
Just a clarification point. I mean, though it's listed on our, on our agenda as possible adoption, I mean, there really is no action because it is just a first read. I just want to make sure that's clear from the public and if
Yep.
anybody's watching us, that though it states that, really there is no action because it is a first read.
Right. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Any other questions? Okay. Ms. Latour?
Okay, so the next one is in response to our current electronic device policy. This is the corresponding regulation. Again, just to clarify for our public, the regulation is how the policy is enforced. So it doesn't change the policy. The policy was approved at Monday night's full board meeting. This just speaks to how it would be enforced. And typically for a regulation, it's to provide that level of consistency amongst the buildings so that every building admin, every teacher is approaching it in the same way. You'll notice that a lot of the language in the regulation is the same as the policy, the opening statement, the definitions, the appropriate use. And when electronic devices can be utilized during the school day, really the only addition is that second part where it speaks to consequences. So the board, in their discussions on the electronic device policy itself, spoke to having a consistent set of steps that a teacher or admin would take moving forward. And in this case, it's outlined in this regulation with a first offense, second offense, and third offense. The first offense really is just a verbal warning, similar to what most teachers do nowadays in general for any type of infraction within the classroom, whether it's with an electronic device or not. Just to get a verbal warning, to remind the student of the electronic device policy, and to communicate home what occurred during class. Second offense, it would be that the student can collect that device from the main office at the end of the school day, which also occurs currently in our buildings, or some of our buildings. A third offense, that the parent would need to come and collect the electronic device at the end of the day. These are the suggestions that were discussed at length at the policy committee meetings. These are comparable to other policies that we looked at around the state of Connecticut. So we felt that they were reasonable in that they were progressive in nature. They involved communication home both at the first and second step. But by the third infraction, that, you know, a parent would need to come to the school to have that conversation. I do need to point out, and I did communicate this with the board, when we look at the regulation for elementary and middle school, the language in terms of the appropriate use of the electronic device is exactly the same as it is in the policy. So it speaks to really the instructional day being from the time the students enter the building to the time they leave, that their phones are shut off, that they're not utilized unless they have permission from the a teacher or from the principal. The high school students I do need to bring to your attention, and I don't mean to complicate a situation, but you know, when we started speaking to this policy, the beginning of June, we took a lot of consensus votes similar to what we were just doing before about high school in general. And the board did take consensus that high school should have it at lunch, which it states in this regulation and in our policy, but during passing time as well. And I struck it out. It was an error on my part that does not align with what the board's wishes were for high school students. So I do feel the need to bring that to all of your attention. While I did talk about it on the June 17th meeting, you know how sometimes conversations go. And you know, I just need to be very upfront that I took out passing time when I shouldn't have. And therefore, we have to have some sort of discussion about that one piece for high school. And then I would need to make the change in the regulation as well. So.
It doesn't say it in this thing right now, though.
No, it doesn't, because I lifted the language right out of the policy, but after Monday night's meeting and after reviewing both the June 3rd meeting and the June 17th meeting, it is an error on my part. And so I need to make sure that you all understood that your wishes were that high school had their electronic device during passing time and during lunch, just high school, and I struck it out.
It's in the minutes. Ms. Purcell.
I do remember, as you're saying now, and it was a very close, it was a 5-4 thing on consensus, and then the next meeting we talked about it, and then nobody brought it back up.
I agree.
So, I mean, you know, even though that happened, nobody brought it back up.
I understand.
And I do think that it was brought up again at the meeting on Monday, and we still voted on it. So
I know, but on Monday, the only reason I brought it up tonight is Monday, I did not have the presence of mind to remember the June meetings, quite honestly. I didn't have my notes with me. I couldn't quite honestly recall. It had been 2 months ago by the time we had that conversation. So, again, not to complicate things, but since the regulation was up for a first read, I did feel the necessity to at least share with you that it really was an error on my part, and so I just needed to add it to this part of the discussion, just for clarity purposes, quite honestly.
So because it's already passed the other way, do we have to go back to that, or is that passed, and then now we're talking about change? I don't know what we're supposed to do, I guess.
Mr. Votto?
I believe at this time, we passed it with that knowledge that it was in there.
Correct.
So I think at this time, just to clean things up, I think we need to take a vote to amend the policy to add it back in, because that's where we wanted it to be. So I think we can't do it tonight, but at the next board meeting, we can take a vote to amend the policy to add passing in, that it can't be used passing in the hall. Does that make sense? No?
Actually, it can be used passing in the hall.
I mean,
It can be.
You'd
No.
have to go,
Yes.
what I would recommend is to do the same process we do for everything. So, I would put the first read on for the operations next week.
Yep.
Just
With the
that
wording what?
one part. That-
Wording
Just the addition of the passing time to high school.
that it cannot be used?
That it can be used. Because that was the will of the board, and that was an error on my part.
That's how we left it, that it can be used.
But then we
Right.
switched it, yeah.
Again, I'm not
The-
trying to
and
complicate
the-
things.
The only other point that I think Ms. Purcell makes that I think is correct is that while I understand there was confusion, that you all do your homework and you read the documents thoroughly. I know that you did read this, and you did vote for it last Monday night.
Right.
So the thing is that technically that was the last read, and I believe it was pulled from the consent agenda.
It was, yeah.
So it was read. So again, you can go back. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go back, but I'm just saying the fact that I know that everybody reads this very thoroughly, and does do their homework. So I just want to
Well,
put that out there.
And in the second read, we had a discussion about it too, and if that was an issue, if people really felt that had to go back in, it didn't come up then either, so.
To go back in to not have it happen during passing time?
Okay, the first read,
No,
it
I'm
was,
serious.
seriously, first read, it was 5-4 passing, that passing could
No,
be
we
in
didn't-
there.
We didn't do any voting or consensus first read.
Just second.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
but unless we made a change,
Okay,
to your point, I don't mean to interrupt you.
no, I'm just saying, the first read, it was 5 people wanted passing in there, 4 did not. And then it got taken out, and then the second meeting, it was taken out, and we had discussions, and nobody brought it in, like, let's put passing back in.
Right.
And then the third read, it's not there, and we took vote, and the vote was leave the passing out. So
Which is fine.
okay.
And
Again.
tonight, we just passed minutes that said passing is in.
Because I'm telling you, that's what it was.
Okay.
Because Pat voted no simply because he wanted the kids to not have the phones during lunch in the high school. But
He
he was
wanted no phone.
satisfied that it was passing,
That it was out.
that it was in.
No,
That it
in
was
for
saying that you cannot use the phone during passing. It was in. What was not in, that they could not use it during lunchtime. They could use it during lunchtime. And Pat voted no that night because he wanted it to be not being able to be used during lunchtime as well.
Correct. I had a conversation with Pat this morning. He was concerned he wasn't going to be here tonight, and he wanted it clarified that his no vote was because he didn't want it to be used at the high schools for either lunch or passing. In other words, to be exactly the way it was for every
Middle
other
school.
level of schooling.
Yeah, he was more strict.
I think we
So
need
I
to-
would recommend this. Again,
Let's
I
just
needed
do it
to
over again.
clarify it, just so that you can kind of think about what I said. You have the ability, if you so desired, really not to do anything tonight, but if you needed to revisit that one small piece of it, to let me know, and I could put it back on, policy committee agenda and adjust it as necessary and go through the same process we do for every other policy. And I don't recommend that you do it any other different. You do it differently. But as we're discussing the regulation and talking about revisions to the regulation, I just felt like I needed to state
Yeah,
it.
but the problem with that, though, is the regulation's gonna get up before the policy,
No,
won't
not
it?
necessarily. So if, say
'Cause
you reflect over the
Don't you want the policy
next.
to do 3 more reads then? But starting with next week, with the
Right.
operations meeting.
Probably do them at the same time.
You
But
would.
we already took a vote. We passed the policy.
What I just said was, if you think about it and decide, I know we took the vote, and I know we discussed the fact that it was struck out, and no one said anything different, and we discussed it Monday night as well. I know all of that. If someone feels strongly that they want it to go back to policy committee just to revise that one part, like any other policy, you just need to let me know. That's why I'm bringing it up this
Okay.
evening.
So,
It will not affect the regulation at all, because if, it could go along the same timeline. That's all I need you to do, is kind of think about what you would like to do with that little nugget, and then decide. In the meantime, this regulation is new. It is the very first read for it. The only thing that's different from the policy is the consequence section. So as you think about the consequences as they are written, if you have questions or comments, which it looks like there might be a few, love to discuss it. And then if you have further ones, like we do for any other time, send them to me and I'll have the adjustments made for the second read.
Ms. Caselli?
Okay, so just to clarify, even though I'm on the policy committee, this is the first written component that we've seen of the reg after our discussion. So, so that's why it might seem odd why would I have questions. I was involved. So again, under the consequences, the first offense, it says the teacher will communicate home to review the policy and detail further consequences for policy violations. To me, that meant an action on the teacher's part to either write an email, make a phone call, somehow contact the parent to tell them to and is it saying for them to communicate to the parent, you need to review the policy, or is it for the teacher to review the policy with them on the phone or in an email? I'm thinking it was to tell them you
really
need to
do either at that point. I think it might look a little bit different depending on the level. An elementary teacher might call and actually step by step go through what the policy states. High school teacher or a middle school teacher may just say, check out the policy, look, we had an issue today, here's a link, you can go right to the website and read it. That could happen at the elementary school too. It depends on the teacher. So, I think what's most important is that the policy is reviewed somehow, whether it's directing them to the website with a link to read it or to verbally state it over the phone. But it's really the communication part to home that is most important for that first step.
So discretion at the teachers?
I think so.
Okay. The other thing I was concerned about with that first offense, we do state that para-educators or coaches, as well as administrators and teachers, can be the ones to impose the violation. So now we don't talk about the coach communicating home. So is the coach, like let's say at the high school level, how is the coach, who's this coach supposed to go to say you need to call the parents because I just...
So I'm not sure where you're looking, Kathy, because the coach really wouldn't have an opportunity to do that because outside of the instructional day, the kids are allowed
in the
to
policy,
use.
I thought somewhere in the policy it talked about administrators, teachers, coaches, paraeducators can all, right? Can all, maybe it's in the policy.
Maybe it was instructional coach.
Oh, right, here we go. Last section, last sentence in the very top paragraph.
Yeah.
That's who could confiscate.
Right. Administrator, teacher, paraeducator, or coach, when a violation has occurred. So the violation occurs, it's the first offense, the coach has done it. Who's, we
Again,
need, we need to be able, I think.
We do.
I think we need to tell
But
them who they're supposed to
a coach
communicate.
isn't ever going to be in that position. I know we listed out a bunch of different staff personnel.
Then we should take him out. If he's never going to do it, we should take him out, right? Because I actually was wondering about that. I said, well, if it's after school, you're with your coach after
Or
school, so
before
how's the
school.
coach
Could be
gonna?
before school too. Hockey.
Right, right, but what I'm saying is you're not within the
But it's not
instructional
the
day,
instructional
so,
day.
so
Not
let's
the
remove
definition.
coach.
But are you saying there's never an opportunity for that to happen? You don't think a coach would ever call a meeting during the day for something and?
I don't understand how a player is, if they're in the middle of a practice, I don't care what sport, why do you have your cell phone? I mean, like, come on, let's be honest
No, I'm
here.
not saying practice, I'm saying if the coach might call a meeting during the day, and if a kid takes out their cell. I mean, what's?
Right, but, okay, what is that?
What if the team's together doing the training and somebody's texting or on the phone?
But it's gonna be after hours, it's not in our definition of school day.
I suppose it's not impossible, so therefore,
I know what
my
you're saying.
recommendation would be
But don't they do
The
the
school
concussion
personnel.
testing during school day?
Faculty or staff member.
That's not
school
done.
personnel.
Right, but again, who's the person who's doing the communicating? And if I'm a paraeducator, who, that's probably easier because they're within a classroom, probably.
Yep.
But if if a paraeducator saw it at lunch or whatever, which teacher is she going to? The teacher she's usually in the classroom with her. Some paraeducators go from classroom to classroom, so just any teacher, I just want to clarify, what am I supposed to do if I'm a paraeducator or a coach?
I just put down the staff member with whom the violation occurs will communicate home to review
Fine.
the policy.
That's fine.
So something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Generic.
Okay. Then I had, for second offense, where it says parents will be notified. By whom? Is that the office staff that will do the notification? Because now for the second offense, so now the phone has been confiscated, it's in the office.
Well, it's the administration. Because it says that electronic device is confiscated by administration, so that means that it goes to the administration. So now that's an office scenario.
Right.
That's not a teacher scenario to call.
Right, so, but I mean, do we need to, it's obvious it would be obvious that the administrators have the responsibility to communicate it.
I
can add it.
Okay, that's fine.
That's fine.
I'm sorry, I'm a stickler for this
No,
stuff. This
no,
is-
I think it's important.
fine.
This is what I lived
No,
and breathed
these
my whole
are-
career at Anthem, you know? it
It's
was like-
important to make it as clear as possible.
What did you say? Yeah, right.
He's just being fresh, so just go.
Okay, and then, my last one, forget that one. But anyway, waiver of liability, I'd like us to add in the very beginning of that sentence, while every effort to safeguard devices will be taken, comma, the district is not responsible for the loss, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah,
'cause
blah.
that's reasonable to say
Right,
that.
right.
I'll get the exact language from you after.
I will email it to you later. Thank you.
Ms. Purcell?
Yeah, I just am concerned with the first offense also. I think at the high school, kids are passing, you know, you're going to have kids that you don't have, that you see, that have got a phone. A verbal warning makes sense to me, but then to have to follow up with a call, maybe if the student, you know, doesn't do what you ask, doesn't put it away, I could see you find out who it is. But I think that's going to be hard to enforce.
Well, we said that all
Well, we've
along.
talked about that the
Yeah,
whole
we've
time.
said that all
To be
along.
honest.
Okay, all right.
So, I think you make every best effort to follow up with that student, maybe towards his next class or his or her next class, but you're not gonna be able to resolve every single issue within this regulation.
Right.
You just aren't.
But I'm just
Right.
saying, being able to call home, you know, if you don't have that student, if they're in your class, it's different, but if you don't have that student,
I think one of the things the policy committee felt very strongly about was, since the second consequence was the phone would reside in the main office, as a parent, I think it's important to know that that will happen if this occurs again. Because, you know, it's the student's belonging, and we felt it was important to make sure parents were aware. So, with every effort that we could possibly do.
Can I forgot one more question that I had with regard, and I think I did email it to you, with regard to where were we logging this? So how's the teacher supposed to know it's the first offense or the second offense or the third offense? So we have to have it logged somewhere. I don't know if that's Power School.
It is, there's a function in Power School
Okay,
for that.
perfect. Okay, thank you.
That's a good point.
And teachers log that in Power School?
Teachers and admin have the ability to log that in Power School.
Mr. Votto, you were next on my list. Did you have your hand up? Okay.
I got nervous there for a minute. I didn't know what I was next on your list for.
Keep in order.
It's a tough meeting.
Put your kids
Karen.
to sleep or something.
Actually, you know
But-
what? Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, Mrs. Castelli made a lot of my points. The only other thing I would say is, under definition, letter A, if you look at the last sentence, regardless of whether a student is, how about on campus instead of no campus?
Yes.
Good catch, Karen.
Oh,
Right?
I'm
Right,
sorry,
right
which-
here.
On the third,
Did you see it?
On campus.
On campus instead of no campus?
Yeah, reverse.
Spell check isn't gonna fix that one.
Yeah,
Oh, I know
no.
it.
Unfortunately not.
Good
Ray?
job.
on the third offense, what's an age-appropriate consequence?
Again, I think has to be some discretion left to building principals. At an elementary school, it might be just a conference with the principal. At the middle school or high school, repeated violations might be a detention, or it really depends. So we felt like we needed to have a little bit of flexibility with the building principal to determine, what all of that looks like. And the building principals do a very, very good job every day of applying common sense, age-appropriate consequences to their students.
Okay, I'm just curious what age-appropriate meant. So that would apply to any student, any age, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or concerns? Okay, so at this point, this is first read.
First read.
No
Yep.
action needed.
Nope. I'll make the adjustments
yeah,
through
maybe.
shading and strikeouts, and you'll see it again shortly. Okay, the last one is really a deletion of the old policy, JFCK, with the adoption of the new electronic devices policy, 5131.81. This one, JFCK, no longer is needed.
Yes, this one.
Yeah, we can get by this
We could get by this one, yeah.
Questions or concerns? Can we take consensus to delete this?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
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 Yes. All right.
Before you adjourn, I have another question.
Yes.
All right. Mrs. Latour, would you please repeat what you said about the read again for the new regulation? Not regulation, the new policy on cellular phones. What are we gonna do?
I said that if anyone feels strongly that they want to revisit that one piece of language, that they should ask the policy committee to re-meet, revise it, and it would go back up for a first read and follow the same steps. So right now, nothing, unless somebody feels strongly enough.
Do we want to hear that this evening?
Adam?
Because we would rather make sure that we know going forward, so.
So if we don't say that we wanna do that, then the
Then it
vote we
stands
took
the
the
way
other
it
night
is.
stands the way it
Yep.
is.
Correct.
And it does or does not include use of phones during passing.
It does not.
It does not include that.
Correct.
So children in high school can use their phone during passing time.
No, they
No,
cannot.
they
That's
cannot.
what I'm saying, I'm getting confused
Well, because
here.
you did a double negative. So the thing is that if the board, if someone tonight says that they want to go back because of that omission, then we go through the process. If no one says something tonight, then the policy stays the way it is.
Which says,
It says that the children cannot use at the high school cell phones during passing time or.
okay.
No,
that's
it
all right.
says that they can use it.
It's
See,
the
here
policy,
we go.
no,
Oh, sorry.
the policy states currently at the high school level that the students are not allowed to use it during the instructional day with the exception of lunch.
Correct.
Okay.
So they can have it out at lunch.
Yes, they can do it.
And that's it.
Okay.
That's what I was.
I want to make a comment. One of the reasons why we said they can have it at passing is because the unenforceable nature of it. And we are adding additional work unnecessarily onto teachers by saying, if I see you have a phone in the hallway, I'm now gonna have to call your mother. And I think that was the reason why the original intent for that, keeping it, allowing students to have it in the hallway, that was the intent of it. So
So-
I do think we need to go back and
Okay.
revisit that through the policy committee,
Okay.
and that was the intent of that. So I'm asking
Can
to go
maybe
back to
we
the
just-
Yeah,
policy.
no,
committee. I'm
that's-
asking to
that's-
go back
That's
to
all
that's
that
all-
it needs to do.
Why am I hung up on the issue that we voted knowing that was in there?
I get it, I do, I really do. And again, it is not my intent to complicate things. However, I just feel like the June 3rd meeting that we had was very clear that the will of the board was that passing time piece. Yes, I said on the 17th that I struck it out and nobody said anything. But it was, it was through that conversation that I don't know definitively, did people remember we took consensus on June 3rd or not? And that's why I felt the need to bring it up. I did not have a clear answer for anyone on Monday because I myself could not remember what took
Okay.
place at that meeting. So, it was an error fully on my part, and I feel badly about that. I feel badly about all this confusion and consternation and all of those things. But I just felt the need to be very clear that the direction of the board on June 3rd was to have passing time at the high school. And for whatever reason, I messed that up and took it out. and did not have any good, answer for anyone on Monday about why
Okay.
it was taken out.
And if everything stands the same, it's gonna be a 5-4 vote, because unless people change their mind between June 3rd and now, it's gonna be a 5-4 vote.
Right, so,
We're gonna
the
move
fact
forward.
that we'll put it back on policy and then adjust the language and go through the 3 reads, people can say, I don't want it, or I want it, or whatever.
It's the right thing.
You're just putting that specific,
Just
that
policy
piece. I
still
got
s-
it, just that.
Just that
Right,
piece.
and the policy
We're
still
not
stands
debating,
the
we're
way
not
it is.
debating the rest of the
Right.
policy. Just that piece. It's the
I
right thing to
understand
do.
that.
It's the right thing to do. It's,
I agree.
Aaron, I want to just respond to your comments. I understand the difficulty in enforcing it. But my thing is, I think it's very dangerous. These kids are walking in the hall with these cell phones out. They're banging into each other. They're banging into doors, some almost falling downstairs because they're too busy. I mean, you see it all the time, videos of people walking into water fountains and everything else while they're looking on their cell phone. Is it hard to enforce? Yes. Even if we don't get 100% enforcement, we're making an attempt to keep these kids safe. It's on the record. We're telling them they cannot use it while they're passing in the hallway. And we also know, let's not even get into the bullying and all that other stuff. If we can deter any of that a little bit, I feel we should have that in the policy. I know it's going to be hard to enforce, be that as it may. I think we're still looking at the best interests of kids.
Ms. Castelli?
I'm sorry, I just want to follow up on that comment. I agree totally with what Mike is saying, and the fact that we're giving them the opportunity to use it during their lunch period should be good enough. They shouldn't have to use it in the hallways.
And like that teacher said here, it was very hard to get them, when they got back into class, to put it away. And it takes 5 minutes or more of a teacher to say, take them, put them away. I know you had it out in the hallway, now you're back in class. Been there, done that. I know what he's talking about. It's very difficult. And you're wasting time just with that one disciplinary thing. And if that can be avoided and save instructional time and agita for the teacher, I say do it. And now I'll shut up.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.